A genius inventor during a moment of foolish mischief was unexpectedly logged out and transported back in time, becoming the current crown prince of the Joseon dynasty in Korean history. From then on, he began to hack the system using his future technological knowledge to reform the country. While other nations were still using oil lamps, his nation had electric lights. When they were still using horses for transport, his nation had trains. When enemy troops were still wearing cloth armor into battle, his army was equipped with iron armor and 6-barreled Gatling guns, continuously firing each shot, taking a life. An extremely dominating performance. Let's see how a 9-year-old crown prince transformed Joseon into the strongest dynasty in history. The story begins with the protagonist Lee Myung-jin, a genius inventor who could create anything. In middle school, he successfully built a steam engine model. In high school, he single-handedly forged iron armor like ancient artisans. In college, he even self-designed a fuelless airplane powered solely by human effort and made a fake gun that was oddly powerful, shooting even more painfully than a real gun, almost getting him arrested by the Imperial Army several times. However, during an earthquake, Lee Myung-jin accidentally dropped flammable and explosive materials onto the ground and instantly got a one-way ticket back to the past. Lee Myung-jin woke up in the body of a newborn baby. He discovered that his family in this life was not ordinary. They were of noble lineage. He initially thought his parents were just regular aristocrats, but it turned out they were not only wealthy but also powerful, as his father was the current crown prince who would later become the 4th king of the Joseon dynasty in Korean history. Lee Myung-jin was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Truly a reborn king, a god of war who started at the finish line. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, Lee Myung-jin was 4 years old. This was when the former king decided to abdicate and pass the throne to the crown prince. When his father became king, Lee Myung-jin naturally became crown prince like all other royal descendants. Lee Myung-jin also had to receive an education from a very young age. Even though he was over 30 years old inside, he still had to attend elementary lessons like a child. It was truly frustrating to skip school. Lee Myung-jin devised a plan based on leveraging his father. Historically, King Sejong the Great was renowned as a wise king. He highly valued invention and actively nurtured talented individuals in the country. Lee Myung-jin's plan was first to gather talented artisans and teach them important skills and knowledge from the future. From that, he would earn his father's respect and trust, and finally just relax, enjoying life without working but still eating. If Mr. Huan saw this, he'd be furious. But outwardly, he still needed to appear studious to gain others' trust, making it easier to manipulate them. The first step in his plan was to win over the people responsible for his education, because later, when he reached adulthood, they would hold important positions in the court. More importantly, he needed to train this group to become his loyal slaves in the future. The next day, while on his way to his study place, Lee Myung-jin suddenly stopped after smelling something foul. Curious, he looked around wondering what could smell so terrible. His eyes landed on a massive pile of feces in the bushes. The young man was speechless. Do high-ranking people just relieve themselves wherever they please like that? Just then, a group of palace maids walked by, bowing to greet the crown prince. As Lee Myung-jin was about to continue, that foul smell wafted into his nose again. He turned his head and discovered that indeed, the last maid in the group had accidentally gotten her skirt soiled with it. Lee Myung-jin was furious, turning purple with anger, upon realizing the perpetrator of that pile was a palace maid. As someone from the modern era, he could not tolerate such indiscriminate defecation. To prevent such a situation from recurring, Lee Myung-jin spoke to his old teachers. Today, on my way here, I saw a palace maid with feces on her skirt. It's normal for humans to relieve themselves, but getting it on their clothes like that is unacceptable. One of the old teachers argued that clothes not only cover the body, but also symbolize social status, so a little inconvenience was perfectly normal. But with the mindset of someone from the future, he immediately shut down the teacher with sharp arguments. Even if a nobleman wears torn clothes, his virtue will still spread throughout the world. Don't you find it outdated to determine a person's social status based on their clothing? The old teachers were rendered speechless. Seeing that they couldn't argue with him, they quickly changed the subject. This is not something that can be resolved overnight. Your Highness, Do you have any other questions?" Seeing this, he inwardly cursed these ill-mannered old men for trying to evade the topic. Lee Myung-jin continued to question, "A few days ago, I read a memorial about the invasion of Tsushima Island. The memorial stated, 'From nobles to commoners, everyone must serve in the military, yet our self-defense forces are so lacking. Why don't we train a navy?'" A torrent of questions poured from his mouth, leaving the old men dumbfounded and stammering. "I want to know why the island's population wasn't evacuated. If you fear that land would be occupied by Japanese pirates, wouldn't it be better to evacuate the people to North Joseon?" The more the old teachers listened, the more they sweated. They hadn't expected the Crown Prince to be so knowledgeable about national affairs. But no matter what Lee Myung-jin said, the old foxes still claimed it wasn't a matter they could discuss. He was incredibly frustrated to hear this, but there was nothing he could do. After that incident, the old men gathered to discuss among themselves. They hadn't expected the Crown Prince, at only 5 years old, to be so intelligent. Other children his age were still in kindergarten, but he at 5 had already outclassed his teachers. They decided that since the Crown Prince was so intelligent, they could teach him more in-depth subjects. They believed that when he ascended the throne later, he would surely become a wise and brilliant emperor. Inside the palace, he was unaware that he had just severely shot himself in the foot. He was already lazy about studying, and now he was forced to learn even more. Currently, he was still resentful of the old men for their disrespectful attitude towards him. According to history, the original owner of this body would die young due to overstudying. Lee Myung-jin had originally planned to act in another 10 years, but it seemed given the current situation he had to start sooner. Another 3 years passed in a flash. Lee Myung-jin turned 7 and was officially inaugurated as the reigning Crown Prince. Before the civil and military officials, the ancient ceremonies were overly complex and protracted, making him feel utterly exhausted. Fortunately, after several years of patient and arduous study, he had become the legitimate Crown Prince. He was now permitted to participate in court discussions with his father, King Sejong the Great. He could propose various plans to develop the nation, aiming for a wealthy and powerful country with prosperous citizens. However, the biggest problem was that the court lacked sufficient funds to operate. Moreover, despite being inaugurated as Crown Prince, he was still just a 7-year-old boy with no real power, so who would listen to him? Nevertheless, he couldn't just sit idly by. He decided to start with small matters first. After filling one side of a paper, Lee Myung-jin accidentally dripped dozens of ink spots onto it. "How annoying. No matter how many times I use it, I can't get used to this brush. This era is truly inconvenient." Suddenly, an idea sparked in his mind. "Ah, that's right. Instead of innovating on grand things, I can start with these small inconveniences first. This is just the beginning." Outside, blacksmiths were heating and shaping iron. This was the Royal Armory, an imperial facility responsible for producing weapons and so on. Lee Myung-jin walked by and found the sight incredibly fascinating. "Just smelling the forging makes me feel at ease. I miss the smell of iron. I'll come here more often as I please, so they get to know me first." An official approached, bowing in obeisance. "Greetings, Your Royal Highness, the Crown Prince." Lee Myung-jin delightedly responded, "It's a pleasure to meet you. Thanks to your efforts, the fortifications of Joseon are growing ever stronger." He was the supervisor of the Royal Armory, Lee Chang-ho. Hearing the Crown Prince's praise, he humbly replied, "It is my honor, Your Royal Highness." Lee Myung-jin cleared his throat and got straight to the point. "Actually, I came here looking for something. Who is the most skilled gold and steel artisan here?" Lee Chang-ho was bewildered and repeated, "Gold and steel, Your Highness." He pondered for a long moment before replying, "There is one person who might be able to help." Upon hearing this, Lee Myung-jin summoned the talented blacksmith. As soon as the blacksmith saw the Crown Prince, he quickly prostrated himself on the ground, saying, "This humble servant requests an audience with Your Royal Highness, the Crown Prince." Lee Myung-jin heard this and said, "Humble? Don't say that. How can a blacksmith at the Royal Armory responsible for building Joseon's defensive fortifications be considered humble?" Master Gong quickly replied, "Your grace is truly boundless." Then, Lee Myung-jin took out a roll of paper and requested, "Come closer. I have something I wish to ask of you." He placed the blueprint on the table and asked, "Can you make this looking at the sketches on it?" Master Gong looked puzzled and asked, "What is this?" "Your Highness," Li Myung-jin placed his hand on the table and explained, "It's a replacement for the writing brush." Master Gong's face showed clear astonishment. It looks like something that can hold ink inside and allow it to flow out when writing, but it seems the most crucial part is that a consistent amount of ink flows out with each stroke." Hearing his speculation, Li Myung-jin was overjoyed that someone understood his idea. Exactly. Furthermore, there needs to be a small rounded tip at the nib's end to prevent too much ink from soaking the paper. Also, how narrow can you make the gap where the ink flows out, Master Gong? Master Gong honestly replied, "If this humble servant puts forth his utmost effort, perhaps around 5 mo." Li Myung-jin began to calculate mentally. 5 mo, huh? 1 chi is about 3 cm. A 1/10 po rule, about 0.1 cm. To achieve that by hand, Li Myung-jin added, "Actually, you'll have to make dozens of these pens, and they need to be finished as quickly as possible, not slowly over months. Since the enamel will come into contact with water, we must use gold and silver instead of iron to prevent rust. It will be made from thinly flattened pieces." Master Gong pointed to the drawing and said, "If we make the mold correctly, we can produce 20 pens a day. The problem is that gap," Li Myung-jin discussed with Master Gong, "when writing the line needs to be about 1 g thin." He thought to himself, about the size of a 0.5 mm mechanical pencil lead should be fine. And after some calculation, Master Gong provided a specific number. "Then, this humble servant will make the gap 1 g wide." "Your Highness," Li Myung-jin seriously asked, "how long do you think it will take?" Master Gong replied, "If your Highness grants me 2 days." Li Myung-jin then said, "I'll give you 3 days. Bring me your best product." Master Gong quickly accepted the order. "This humble servant obeys your Royal Highness the Crown Prince." 3 days later, as promised, Master Gong presented Li Myung-jin with the finished product. "I've made 5 nibs with 5 different degrees of fineness, Your Highness. Please try them and choose the one you prefer." He attached a nib to the pen body and said, "All right." He gently dipped the nib into the inkwell, then drew a decisive line on the paper. The nib created a very thin and elegant line. Seeing the result surpass his expectations, Li Myung-jin beamed, while the 2 officials, Master Gong and Li Chang-ho, stared in wide-eyed amazement. He continuously praised, "I love it. You did an excellent job," Master Gong replied. "It's all thanks to Your Highness's guidance, Crown Prince." After trying all the nibs he ordered, "Then make another 100 with this fineness and store 10 of them very carefully." Master Gong immediately complied, "Yes, Your Highness." Incidentally, Li Myung-jin also requested, "And can you engrave plum blossoms on the nib of this gold pen?" Without much thought, Master Gong replied, "Of course, Your Highness." Li Myung-jin eagerly asked, "How long will that take?" Master Gong confidently replied, "In days are enough, Your Highness." Yi Hyang carefully reminded, "I will give you 2 more days. In return, you must not produce any defective products, and then I will introduce it to my father." Jang Yong-sil bowed to the ground in obedience. "I swear I will not make any defective products, Your Highness." Yi Hyang added another important point. "By the way, I would be very grateful if you could keep this a secret before I introduce it to my father." Jang Yong-sil quickly replied, "Understood, Your Highness." After their discussion, Yi Hyang swiftly departed. Yi Jang-ho, standing behind, remarked about Yi Hyang, "His Highness truly is more mature than his age." Jang Yong-sil also agreed with this observation. "Yes. I heard His Highness is only 8 years old this year, but the way he speaks and acts is like a 30-year-old adult." Yi Jang-ho turned his head and asked, "Let's put that aside. As for you, you must have realized something, haven't you? The best artisan of Yoseon isn't that wonderful." It turned out Jang Yong-sil had received a certificate personally awarded by Crown Prince Yi Hyang. He treasured this gift immensely. "I must find a carpenter to make the coolest frame for this. It's truly worthy of being kept as a family heirloom." Finally, the pen made to Yi Hyang's specifications was completed. It had exquisite plum blossom engravings on it. The pen moved very smoothly on the paper, producing incredibly fine lines. After trying it, King Sejong was utterly surprised. What a miraculous item! On the 10th day of the 12th month of the 3rd year of King Sejong's reign, the Crown Prince created the golden pen and introduced it to the king. The king tried it and praised it non-stop. My wrist and arm feel very comfortable when writing with this pen. Writing quickly is also very neat. The Crown Prince has created something truly remarkable. Yi Hyang humbly replied, "Father, you praise me too much." His father ordered a scribe, "Be sure to write down everything the Crown Prince has done today." The scribe bowed and accepted the order, "Yes, Your Highness." King Sejong gazed at the pen for a long time. "Crown Prince, you have done something truly wonderful." Suddenly he noticed a special detail. "Are these plum blossoms?" Yi Hyang immediately replied, "Yes, that's right. They are engraved on the pen because they are a symbol of the royal family." The more his father listened to his explanation, the prouder he felt. "Very good, but how did you come up with the idea for this item?" As expected, the king asked the reason why the Crown Prince created this item. Yi Hyang was momentarily stunned, muttering to himself, "Here it comes." He relied on his intelligence to answer, "One day when father dipped the brush in ink to write, I noticed something unusual." The king was curious. Unusual. Yi Hyang recounted, "I saw the ink soaking up the brush hairs. By nature, water flows from top to bottom, but what I saw was the opposite. How could I not find that interesting? So I started working on it." The king highly praised the Crown Prince's intelligence. Countless people have used calligraphy brushes before, but no one has had a thought like yours. Isn't this a classic example of acquiring knowledge through experience? Yi Hyang boldly stated, "Thank you for your Majesty's grace. Therefore, I have a request." The king immediately said, "Tell me." Yi Hyang called out, "Eunuch, bring them here." The eunuch carried a mysterious box in his hand. "Yes, Your Highness." Yi Hyang said to his father, "Please bestow these golden pens upon the historians and the court officials." The king wondered, "All of these pens? The Crown Prince proposes that the ministers and officials who need to write quickly should use them." "Yes, the historians record everyone's deeds without rest. This is a job that easily makes people tired, so I thought they needed something to help them a little." Everyone's eyes widened in surprise when someone finally understood and sympathized with their work. The king asked for everyone's opinion. "I think the Crown Prince's idea is excellent. What do you all think?" Everyone agreed with Yi Hyang's idea. "We, your humble servants, think the Crown Prince is right. To think that someone so young would think of his officials in such a way, isn't that a beautiful sight?" Finally, the king permitted, "Bring the golden pens to the historians and officials in the court." The attendants quickly followed the order. "Yes, Your Majesty." Throughout the session, the king sat smiling in happiness, and the officials also shared in the joy. His Royal Highness and the Crown Prince truly have profound thoughts. Yi Hyang smiled contentedly. Not long after the golden pen that Yi Hyang had created caused a new phenomenon in Joseon. On the 10th day of the 12th month of the 3rd year of King Sejong's reign, the Crown Prince created the golden pen and introduced it to the king. The king tried the golden pen and praised it non-stop. The king asked the reason why the Crown Prince created it, and the Crown Prince replied that seeing ink climb up the brush hairs gave him the idea to create that item. The king highly praised the Crown Prince's intelligence, proposing that ministers and officials who need to write quickly should use them. After Yi Hyang created the golden pen and introduced it to the court officials, they reacted enthusiastically. The historians and officials in the court loved this item immensely. Everyone always talked about it. "Have you tried the golden pen the Crown Prince invented?" "I have. The pen is really good." One reason it became so famous was that using the golden pen made writing memorials much easier. Furthermore, Yi Hyang also invented writing boards for them. When generals are carrying out their duties, sometimes they have to give urgent orders. Therefore, I created this type of writing board so that you can write comfortably anywhere. It will be the perfect complement to the golden pen. The users exclaimed in surprise. How wonderful! King Sejong was very pleased and immediately ordered both items to be produced in large quantities and distributed to his generals along with the golden pens. Moreover, the golden pen Yihyang created significantly changed the kingdom. The entire capital was bustling with trade. How much is it in total? 2 mal and 3 GOP of white rice, but I'll only charge you for 2 mal and 2 GOP. Isn't that too expensive? Let me borrow some ink and a calculation board. The vendor quickly produced them. Here you go, sir. The customer began writing a few words to test it. Today I'm buying 2 mal of white rice. He widened his eyes, admiring it. That's the rumored golden pen, isn't it? The vendor replied. Yes, that's right. It's the very pen His Majesty himself made known. It even has beautiful plum blossom patterns. And the customer exclaimed in admiration, It's truly beautiful, the customer added with a smile. It's also easy to carry around and so convenient when I need to write something urgently. Now I must take all the paper I bought today home. With those words, he waved goodbye and walked away. The vendor bowed in return. All right, sir, please be careful on your way home. Even after the customer was out of sight, the vendor still pondered the golden pen. I smell money. A few days later, during a court session, an official reported to His Majesty, recently something unsavory has been happening on the streets. Unsavory speak. There are rumors that fake golden pens are recently being sold rampant everywhere. How dare they counterfeit such a precious item bearing the royal mark? This is truly disrespectful. This crime must be severely punished. Everyone unanimously implored His Majesty to mete out strict punishment. His Majesty suddenly remembered Yihyang. I believe we should consult the Crown Prince. The boy is the one who invented the golden pen. He immediately called out, Someone summon the Crown Prince. A moment later, Yihyang was present. Father, you called your humble son. King Sejong went straight to the point. The ministers say that those who profit by counterfeiting golden pens must be severely punished. Crown Prince, I wish to hear your opinion. Yihyang acknowledged with a soft, yes, then frowned in thought. Everyone looked at him, finding him adorable. A few minutes later, Yihyang spoke, Father, may I be allowed to resolve this matter? A month passed in the blink of an eye. Crown Prince Yihyang slowly entered the ministry. All those present knelt bowing respectfully. Your humble servants greet the Crown Prince. He spoke, All right. Do you know why I summoned you here? It's for this. He took out a pen. One of the men immediately turned pale upon seeing it. No one dared to raise their heads. We humble servants would never dare to let our merchant guild commit such an irreverent act. My humble servants' merchant guild wouldn't dare either. He shot a glance at them and said, I'm not here to accuse you. Stand up. Sweat profusely poured from their trembling bodies. Yihyang let out a distinct "Tsk," his voice dropping noticeably. Don't make me repeat myself. What do you think you're doing? Quickly stand up. While everyone was settling down, he had already taken his seat at the table, his words resolute. I will speak plainly. From now on, I intend to assign the production of both golden pens and regular pens to one of the merchant guilds present here. However, the merchants producing golden pens will be required to pay 20% of the profits from sales to the court. Additionally, the market price of golden pens must not exceed 60% of their production cost. A man softly asked, Your Highness, forgive this humble servant, but is there a problem? He began to meticulously analyze. A 60% profit sounds like a lot, but if we include the commission for the sellers and the workers share the profit we humble servants actually receive, will drop to only 30%. Furthermore, if the court collects 20%, then we humble servants will be left with only 10%. Upon hearing this, Yihyang slammed his hand on the table, his expression darkening. How dare you lie directly to my face? The man immediately fell silent. Yihyang pointed and roared, I said 20% of the profit isn't 20% of 30% only about 6%. He commanded, Throw that disloyal, money-blinded, deceitful wretch out and revoke that merchant guild's bidding rights immediately. The man stammered repeatedly, calling out, Your Highness. 2 soldiers quickly dragged him away, disregarding his pleas. Your Highness, please forgive me, Your Highness. Another person secretly watched in fear. A heavy atmosphere enveloped everyone. No one dared to utter another word. Yi Hyang spoke, "His Majesty and I both believe that the merchants and common people of Joseon are very important. No one can do everything by themselves. In life, one always needs someone's help." He stood up abruptly and declared loudly, "However, if any of you dare to lie like him, you merchants will all be considered useless. Remember that well." Everyone respectfully replied, "We humble servants will remember clearly, Crown Prince, Your Highness." After the Crown Prince had made his stance clear, the Golden Pen bidding session concluded without any further tricks. Yi Hyang privately summoned the eunuch. The corners of his mouth curved up in pleasure. "You did very well, eunuch." "Oh, I wouldn't dare, Your Highness," the eunuch replied. He was a little confused. "But why did Your Highness have to do that?" Yi Hyang sighed. "You know, I am still too young. I had no other choice." The eunuch understood. "Indeed. Then this humble servant begs leave." Yi Hyang responded, "Very well." In his heart, he was immensely pleased. "Excellent. Everything is going smoothly. Just keep this up." Until one day an official suddenly stepped forward. "Your Highness, this humble servant Grand Inspector Chung Yum has something to report." He spoke each word gravely. "We cannot continue to follow the Crown Prince's plan." This official reported with great determination. "Your Majesty, this humble servant, Grand Inspector Chung Yum, has a few words to say." This was the first time Jin Ho had faced such a scene of political maneuvering. He turned his head to look at the Grand Inspector. Chung Yum, with a resolute expression, said, "We cannot continue with the Crown Prince's plan, Your Majesty." Since my reincarnation as Yi Hyang a short while ago, laughter had echoed ceaselessly. Holding the Treasury report, everyone was delighted. The Treasury was growing. The national coffers had never been so full. Since the start of the Golden Pen trade, the situation had gradually improved. Because of this, King Sejong and his officials began to notice the positive impact of commerce. His Majesty praised the Crown Prince profusely. "He has truly done a very good job." Nevertheless, the disapproving factions secretly began to gather. A few people gathered discussing how can the court turn into a business place. Of course, it will turn into the lowest class in society. His Majesty and the officials are showing too much support for them. Grand Inspector Chung Yum stroked his beard and said, "The root of all these problems lies with His Highness the Crown Prince. We must quickly expose this to His Majesty. Things cannot be allowed to continue down this wrong path." All those present agreed. No matter how intelligent His Highness the Crown Prince is, isn't he just a child? To think that His Majesty would let a child decide such important matters is truly a huge mistake. But before those who disapproved of the Crown Prince could complain, King Taejong, the retired king, passed away. On the 10th day of the 5th month of the 4th year of King Sejong's reign, the retired King Taejong passed away at the age of 56. They had no choice but to set this matter aside. "It seems we should wait for the next opportunity. Let's do that." On another front, Yi Hyang was truly busy. Day and night he diligently read one book after another. So the European books of this era were obtained from China. He stood with his hands on his hips, a confident expression on his face. "Hopefully, this will roughly solve the problem related to the source of my inspiration. If I claim everything as my own idea, they will immediately suspect me." Yi Hyang's expression darkened. "I also have to learn how to deceive them." Everything was going according to plan. He presented clearly and coherently before everyone. "That is why I think it would be much more convenient if these Indian numerals, or as Westerners call them Arabic numerals, were used in our country. What do your highnesses and court officials think about the Crown Prince's proposal?" Minister of the Ministry of Taxation, Kim Jom spoke after careful consideration. "This humble servant thinks Indian numerals are indeed very useful in representing numbers." Minister of the Ministry of Personnel Hyo Do said, "This humble servant agrees as well." His Majesty quickly made a decision. "Then, with the consensus from these two key ministries, you are permitted to use Indian numerals starting next month. If the results are good, they will be circulated nationwide." Everyone unanimously bowed in compliance. Then, for the next memorial, after reading only a few lines, King Sejong spoke, "I think the Crown Prince must hear this." Yi Hang responded confused. "Yes, father," His Majesty said, troubled. "The Ming Emperor has sent a letter to King Sejong requesting the Military Provisions Bureau to manufacture golden pens and present them to the Ming Emperor. The Yongle Emperor was very pleased and commanded that he must present an additional 10,000 golden pens as tribute." The Crown Prince already knew that the national coffers were low. He fell into contemplation. A light suddenly flashed in Yi Hyang's mind. He put forward a proposal. "Father, what if the court itself opened a merchant guild?" Upon hearing the words merchant guild, everyone was astonished. "How can that be?" His Majesty reminded them, "Grand Inspector, be quiet for a moment. Crown Prince, you may continue." He began to explain thoroughly. Since the Ming Emperor sent that letter, it means that golden pens are quite popular in the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty not only has a vast territory, but also a very large population. Therefore, the number of literate people must be several times higher than in Joseon. If we contact trading groups to handle the production of golden pens, then the number of golden pens sold will be many times higher than the number of tribute items the Ming Dynasty requested. His Majesty gave a thoughtful and fell into contemplation. The Minister of the Ministry of Taxation ceaselessly calculated in his head. If calculated based on that, both men smiled with the same knowing implication. "We will definitely make a profit," Yi Hyang continued, "and our side will also request the merchants to escort the envoy delegation to the Ming Dynasty. In return, the merchant guilds will only need to pay for accommodation." Chung Yum gruffly objected, "No, we cannot follow His Highness the Crown Prince's plan." He presented his reasons. The Crown Prince's plan will certainly bring wealth to the court. But looking at what has happened in the past, if we become too wealthy, the people will indulge in luxury. This will then turn into tyranny, and at that point, the royal family's power will no longer be stable. Someone from behind spoke up. "This humble servant, Minister of the Ministry of Rights, agrees with the Grand Inspector's opinion. How can lowly merchants be allowed to serve as envoys to meet the emperor of an empire like the Ming Dynasty that would defile Joseon's honor? It seems His Highness the Crown Prince does not truly understand state affairs and our country's policies. I think it would be best to let him diligently study and learn to view state affairs and national policies through the eyes of a monarch." Yi Hyang asked his father, "May your humble son be permitted to answer?" King Sejong nodded. "You are permitted. Did Grand Inspector say that if we become wealthy, the people will indulge in luxury, and then everything will lead to tyranny? Is that correct?" "That's right. If we look at what happened in the past," Yi Hyang immediately interrupted. "If we look at what happened in the past, it was the people themselves who bled and sweated to maintain this luxury." He then challenged, "Are you telling me to bleed and sweat the common people? Did I not say that we should bring wealth in from outside?" Chung Yum paid no heed to these words. No matter how good the outcome of this matter, there is no guarantee that everything will proceed smoothly in the future. And when something happens, the common people will be the ones to suffer. Yi Hyang frankly asked, "Are you only living for today, Grand Inspector?" The Grand Inspector gradually lost his composure. "What did you say?" Yi Hyang did not hesitate to repeat himself. "How can you be so sure that those golden pens will only be sold once, and that merchants won't sell anything else?" He scowled and asked, "Are high-ranking officials using golden pens? At first many might buy them out of curiosity, but in the end, that thing isn't as elegant as a calligraphy brush. All right, it will become nothing more than a toy." The Minister of the Ministry of Taxation spoke up. "Grand Inspector, you are mistaken. Do you know how many golden pens have been consumed in the past month? In the court alone, it's 400, and among the common people, it's over 1,000. Chung Yum gasped. "In 1 month, how could such a frivolous thing reach that extent?" Yi Hyang immediately admitted, "My apologies, it is frivolous because it was created by a child, me." The Grand Inspector quickly bowed his head. "Please forgive this humble servant, Your Highness. Please pardon my imprudence." Yi Hyang raised his voice. "Therefore, for the minimal benefit of the people, the court's relationship with merchants is truly important. Eunuch, bring the book from my room titled World Geography." A moment later, the book was in His Majesty's hands. "This is one of the books I collected thanks to the envoys who went to the Ming Dynasty. It records the geography and regional products of the Ming dynasty and neighboring countries. Furthermore, it records that the Ming dynasty and Dai Viet harvest more food than we do in Joseon. They also have food reserves. Many poor people have suffered from hunger because of the meager food harvest due to droughts and spring famines. Therefore, we must use the profits from the envoys to buy food and provide relief for the people. Once again, Chungyum roared, "No! The correct path for a king is for both ruler and people to be equally poor and honest, enduring poverty, and finding joy in acting honestly and cultivating virtue." Yihyang loudly retorted, "You say we should be proud in poverty and find joy in acting honestly. Do you see any people who truly want to live honestly in poverty? Now they are just poor. In summer they die from drought. In winter they freeze. In spring they starve to death. In such a dire situation, will anyone praise the virtue of that king?" He continued sternly, "There is a saying, even a nobleman will jump over a wall if his son is hungry for 3 days. No father or mother can rest peacefully when their children are hungry. The king is the father of the people. Shouldn't that father do something for his children?" His Majesty was greatly excited. "My son speaks very well." All the officials said no more. The historian looked around in bewilderment, then diligently began to write. His Majesty subtly cleared his throat, signaling. Many court officials opposed the Crown Prince's idea. The Crown Prince, deeply disappointed with them, passionately expressed his desire for Joseon's prosperity and to relieve the people of the country. Hearing these words, His Majesty exclaimed, "My son speaks very well." His Majesty tried to regain his composure. Yihyang also noticed this. Everyone present remained silent, waiting. After a moment, King Sejong spoke. "Crown Prince, continue." Yihyang replied, "Yes, Father. The ministers and nobles outside the palace can fast because they know why they must fast and how to fast. However, commoners lack that knowledge and do not know how to fast. If we want to educate them, we should at least relieve their hunger first, shouldn't we?" The king slammed his hand down. "That's right." Everyone stared at Yihyang. He thought to himself, "Father is so agitated he's about to explode. Let's stop here for today." Since ancient times, it has always been said that the will of the people is the will of heaven. Even if we maintain our virtue, what will the divine beings above think of us if the people's will is still lamenting? Furthermore, there is also a folk saying, "Man proposes, God disposes." After we have done our best, shouldn't we wait to see the reaction of the divine? Even so, even when droughts or epidemics occur, the ministers say it is because the monarch has lost his virtue and demand that His Majesty maintain his virtue first. Isn't that going against the above demand? I know many of you here have been officials since before this dynasty was born. So why don't you say that King Taejo lost his virtue because he founded his dynasty while originally being a subject of the Goryeo dynasty, or my grandfather, King Taejong? Did he also lose his virtue because he raised his sword against his brothers? Or is my father also without virtue because he ascended the throne instead of my uncle, who was the eldest son? Upon hearing this, the Grand Inspector Chungyum immediately cried out, "Your Highness, Crown Prince, that is truly not the case. Your Majesty, we humble servants have never dared to harbor such disgusting and disloyal thoughts. We beg your Majesty's grace." All of them unanimously begged for His Majesty's grace. His Majesty spoke. The Crown Prince's words were a bit too harsh. "I hope you will forgive him. Remember to choose your words carefully next time." Yihyang immediately replied, "I understand, Father." The king looked at the ministers. "Listen carefully. I also believe that the lives of the people are most important. Furthermore, the tribute to the Ming Emperor will also be carried out according to the Crown Prince's plan." Everyone bowed in compliance. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Crown Prince, is there anything else you wish to add?" Yihyang quickly replied, "I believe it is more reasonable to pay the people for their labor with food than to simply give charity." The king was surprised to hear this. Pay for labor. The Crown Prince explained in detail. Low rainfall is indeed the biggest reason for drought, but the lack of irrigation systems and water reservoirs is also another important factor. We must prepare for droughts by building water reservoirs in every town and renovating existing ones. I think we can mobilize the people to do this work and pay them with food. This way we can alleviate hunger. Isn't that killing two birds with one stone, Your Excellencies?" All of them approved. "We humble servants think this is a wonderful idea. Your Majesty," His Majesty ordered, "go back to your residence, Crown Prince." He bowed respectfully, "Yes, Father." The king suddenly remembered something and said, "And remember to participate in the political discussions after the ancestral rites." "Thank you, Father, for allowing this young and immature child to participate in political discussions." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned and left. His Majesty also stood up. "This afternoon's session ends here. Everyone, you are dismissed." "Yes, Your Majesty." But before anyone took a step, he added, his voice lowering, "Furthermore, I should perhaps consider what you ministers truly think of this dynasty." Everyone was terrified. "Your Majesty, we humble servants have never harbored such disloyal thoughts. Your Majesty, have mercy." His expression darkened. "Go back to work." "Your Majesty, have mercy." And when they were outside, the court officials whispered among themselves, "If we make just one wrong move, there could be bloodshed. It's not just King Taijo, he also carries the blood of previous monarchs." Grand Inspector Chung Yum cut in, "Stop talking nonsense. Watch your mouths. I am only worried about the future of this nation, that's all." "Is this the outcome?" he growled. They quickly signaled, "Don't you know the mouth harms the body?" Chung Yum sighed. "Oh dear, we have suffered too great a loss. We kept looking down on His Highness just because he is young." Someone walking beside him asked, "What do you think we should do?" He frowned and said, "If there's no other way, we will have to submit our resignations." Everyone was confused upon hearing this. "Resign," he continued. "However, admonishing His Majesty when he is misguided is also our duty. Even the classic of history says a wise ruler must listen to the voice of the people. I will ensure His Majesty is a wise ruler." His words were full of hidden meaning. The teacup was placed down. "Your concubine heard that the Crown Prince caused a great controversy at this morning's court session." His Majesty recounted tiredly. "The Crown Prince did nothing wrong. Quite the opposite, in fact. He spoke very accurately. I was the one who caused the commotion. I couldn't control myself and repeated words I had spoken when I was a Grand Prince. So, my face, as king..." The Queen laughed so hard, tears flowed. "It's such a pity your concubine didn't see His Majesty's face then." He said softly, awkwardly, "Queen, I was very ashamed." She smiled. "But Your Majesty's expression is much better than before, isn't it?" He didn't realize this. "Is that so?" The Queen poured tea into his cup. "You can speak freely, Your Majesty. You don't need to fear the historian's pen, do you?" He savored his teacup. "You are right. My top priority must be to be at ease myself. You are wise, Your Majesty." He continued, "I also told the Crown Prince that he will participate in political discussions after the ancestral rites." She was a little worried. "Is that all right? The Crown Prince is still so young." His Majesty recalled, "With the way he acted this morning, and how he handled the golden pen issue, I think it will be fine. The more I look at him, the more he seems like a 40-year-old man." The Queen couldn't help but laugh. "Not long ago, Your Majesty was worried that his intelligence would create a barrier between you two, but now it seems you are more at ease." He affirmed without hesitation, "Yes, I am at ease." Upon returning to the palace, His Majesty ordered the head eunuch and everyone else to leave. Only, when he was alone, did he breathe a sigh of relief. "Now, should I let them reveal themselves, or should I force them out?" His mind was greatly conflicted. Should I let everything end peacefully, or should there be bloodshed? He racked his brain. There are still many people from my father's time in the palace. I need to have officials on my side. Officials who only obey my commands. When King Sejong's decree was issued, the Ministry of Taxation began to manufacture golden pens as tribute to the Yongle Emperor. However, during the preparation process, a serious problem arose. The Emperor asked, "What did you say? You can't manufacture them in time." An official replied, Please forgive this humble servant, Your Highness, but the merchant guild responsible for manufacturing the golden pens reported that they are unable to produce enough to meet the deadline. Yi Hyang mused. Just as I thought. With the current state of Joseon's artisan workshops, it's impossible to produce golden pens in time. Then he said, Father, I want to confirm something. May I summon someone from that merchant guild? Chung Yum objected, No. How can a lowly merchant be summoned to a place of state affairs? The emperor said, Grand Inspector, you knew how I would answer. That's why you dared to interrupt me, didn't you? At this moment, Chung Yum realized he had overstepped his bounds and stammered, This humble servant. The emperor continued, I understand your loyalty, but why don't you offer alternative solutions instead of just blindly rejecting everything? Chung Yum bowed and replied, Please forgive this humble servant, Your Highness. Then the king ordered, Then quickly summon someone from the merchant guild. A person from the merchant guild entered and knelt. This humble subject greets Your Highness. The king said, I summoned you because the crown prince has something he wishes to ask you. Remember to answer honestly. The man replied, Yes, Your Highness. Then Yi Hyang asked, I hear you cannot produce golden pens in time. Why is that? The man explained, Because a golden pen is a delicate work. We must be extremely focused to make one. No matter how fast our hands are, there will be a limit. Yi Hyang said, So the entire process of producing each pen is done by a single person. Is that right? The man replied, Yes, that's right. A skilled artisan must focus on making each pen one by one. Yi Hyang thought for a moment, then said, Father, I have a solution, but I need to speak with the artisans of the merchant guild. Chung Yum vehemently objected again. Your Highness, first it was this lowly merchant, now Your Highness wants to summon an artisan to this noble place? Please, Your Highness, consider carefully. The emperor roared. Grand Inspector, you should shut your mouth. Why can I not summon him when this is a matter of national importance? He refused to give up and continued to speak. Your Highness. And the emperor lost patience and said, If you keep talking so much, I will begin to doubt your loyalty. Then everyone fell silent. No one dared to object further. The eunuch called out, Summon the artisan to court. At this moment, Yi Hyang said, I hear that one artisan has to do all the steps to create a golden pen, is that correct? The kneeling people replied, Yes, that's right. Yi Hyang continued, I have a suggestion for you. When making golden pens, each person will do a separate step. One person presses the nib, another shapes the nib, and a third engraves patterns. Do you think changing the way golden pens are made like this would work? The people looked at each other in surprise, then replied, Perhaps so, Your Highness. We will need some time to get used to it, but once we are accustomed, I believe it will be faster than the current method. Yi Hyang said, This is called division of labor. When many people cooperate to work together, they can produce a large quantity of products at a faster speed. The emperor said, Very reasonable. Then I will await good news from you. You may withdraw. After the people had left, the king asked, Division of labor to increase productivity. How did you come up with such a brilliant idea? Crown Prince? He thought of a reason to reply. When I visited the kitchen, I saw the assistant cooks and palace maids dividing tasks according to the head chef's orders. I remembered that, and that's where I got this idea. The emperor smiled happily. The boy comes up with such brilliant ideas from things others often overlook. The crown prince is truly an extraordinary child. What do you ministers think? Everyone replied, We humble servants agree, Your Highness. The crown prince is very discerning. And however, Chung Yum went against the majority and said, This humble servant believes that the crown prince pays too much attention to trivial matters. His Majesty should use his discerning mind to study the teachings of the sages instead. The emperor said, Why do you consider contemplating and finding meaning from things that ordinary people overlook as trivial matters? Don't the sages also contemplate what's good for the country and its people, and then share their thoughts? Why do you think so narrowly? He replied, This humble servant only wishes the best for the crown prince. The king flared up. Is it true, as the crown prince said the other day, that you believe I and my ancestors are unworthy of ruling, and that is why you dare to speak such insolent words? Chung-yum quickly and anxiously explained, "This humble servant dares not harbor such disloyal thoughts. I beg your highness to understand." Another minister thought, "It's true that the Grand Inspector's words were a bit narrow-minded, but it's not worth His Highness oppressing him like this. It's normal to boast about having an excellent child, but using power to oppress those who disagree tarnishes a king's dignity." Yi-hang also thought father is revealing his true nature again. A moment later, he returned to the Eastern Palace, closed the door, and sighed in relief. That was tense. What would have happened if I hadn't been able to fabricate an example of division of labor? Now that I think about it, father has been summoning me very often lately. I only wanted father to pay a little attention to me, but it seems I've dug my own grave. I didn't even know that the concept of division of labor didn't exist in this era. Even before Adam Smith mentioned the concept of division of labor, it had always occurred naturally. However, what made the division of labor a rule in industry was the consensus between absolute monarchy and the principle of market regulation. What about absolute monarchy in Joseon? Although nominally an absolute monarchy, from a historical perspective, it was a power struggle between the monarch who wanted to maintain absolute monarchy and the officials who wanted a republican system. And the people wanted a semi-republican government. The monarch loves his subjects more than himself. Only then can the people's interests be guaranteed, and only then can they have real power. Success cannot be achieved overnight. I will have to build it step by step. Consolidating the king's power. Father would also want to do that. I must ensure father's power reaches even the most remote parts of the country, and to do that I need money. Decided I will fill the national coffers first. Then he left the Eastern Palace and went to the main hall. The emperor asked in surprise, "What are you doing here?" He replied, "I have something to say about the envoy delegation preparing to go to the Ming dynasty. There is something that needs to be confirmed by the Ming emperor." Others who heard him were surprised, thinking, "What's the crown prince's purpose this time?" Yi-hang said, "I have something to say about the envoy delegation about to go to the Ming dynasty. There is something that needs to be confirmed by the Ming emperor." And the emperor was curious. What is it, he thought? What is it this time? He smiled faintly, calculating. The first way to fill the national coffers is to obtain a monopoly on golden pens. First, we must ensure that Joseon merchants gain a monopoly on the trade of golden pens in the Ming dynasty. The Ming emperor keeps demanding more golden pens as tribute, so clearly, the Ming dynasty seems to really like this type of pen. The Ming dynasty is several times larger than Joseon, so as I said the other day, the demand for golden pens is also many times higher. Next, regarding the Ming dynasty envoys, every time they come to our country, they demand a lot of tribute items. Therefore, we must obtain an imperial decree to prevent their envoy delegation from making such demands. Chung-yum impulsively shouted, "Your Highness, that is impossible. The Ming court views Joseon as a vassal state. How can a vassal state dare to complain about the people of the mother country? That is extremely impolite." Yi-hang questioned, "Where is the impoliteness? Do you mean that people from a big country have the right to bully a small country?" He said, "The problem is not there. If we suddenly decide to reduce tribute items compared to the usual practice, there will surely be serious consequences." Yi-hang thought, annoyed. This old man keeps opposing me. Then he said, "Where do you think those tribute items come from? Aren't they painstakingly produced by the people of our country? Furthermore, the amount of tribute demanded by the Ming dynasty is constantly increasing, meaning the food for our people is constantly decreasing. At this rate, even the taxes collected into the national coffers will decrease. Shouldn't we resolve this risk before it happens?" Chung-yum retorted, "That is because His Highness the Crown Prince still does not understand state affairs. The people in the envoy delegation are all eunuchs, the closest servants to the emperor. If they speak ill of our country to the emperor, we could be in danger." Yi-hang replied, "Do you really think the Ming emperor is that foolish?" He said, "That is not what this humble servant means. It's just that your highness is still too young, and this humble servant fears you might cause a great loss for a small gain." Yi-hang angrily asked, "What does that have to do with my age? And you just said causing a great loss for a small gain, didn't you?" He continued, Every time the Ming Dynasty envoy delegation comes, the tribute items they take away block 5 li of road. Isn't that wealth they stole from Joseon's national coffers, and its people sages of old once said that the duty of officials is to ensure the people can live peacefully. But you keep demanding that we grovel and serve those eunuchs. Why is that? Chungyum said, you are exaggerating. We are not groveling, we are just… Yihyang interrupted. I haven't finished speaking. Mencius once said that a virtuous person, even in the most luxurious place, still demonstrates benevolence. Even when holding the highest position, they maintain integrity and always steadfastly follow the path of virtue. Is bowing down offering wealth to those eunuchs and flattering them consistent with any of those 3 things? If so, do you still dare to call yourselves virtuous gentlemen? Then he knelt down and pleaded, Please, Father, allow your humble son to lead this envoy delegation. Your humble son will implore the Ming Emperor and do everything possible to end this wrong custom. Please, Father, grant permission, he continued. It is true that I am still young, only 9 years old, but my determination is higher than the tallest mountain. The emperor rubbed his forehead and said, Crown Prince, the road to Beijing is very long and arduous. Yihyang continued, Joseon's current situation is both a danger and an opportunity. If we know how to take advantage of it, it will be the foundation for development for thousands of years to come. But if we fail, we will forever remain a small, isolated nation. I hope Father understands your humble son. The king said, Crown Prince, return to your palace. He then called Eunuch. The Crown Prince seems overly agitated. Take him back to the palace and calm him down. Yihyang shouted, Father, please let me go, Father. Upon returning to the Eastern Palace, he angrily shouted, Everyone out! Damn it, I was too agitated. Sitting alone in the palace, he pondered. Damn that Chungyum! He looks down on me because I'm young. He's been picking on me since last time. I won't sit idly by. Just you wait, you bastards. Then he called, Eunuch, prepare for a trip to the Ming Dynasty. The eunuch was startled. What? Why, suddenly, I told you to prepare my belongings. At this moment in the main hall, the officials said, We cannot do as the Crown Prince says, Your Highness. We beg Your Highness to understand us. The king sighed. Do you know how long that child sleeps in a day? Never more than 6 hours. A 9-year-old child knows how to think of ways to make the nation wealthy, yet all you know how to say is no. No, 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 the officials bowed. We humble servants deserve 1,000 deaths. We humble servants deserve 1,000 deaths. Suddenly, someone rushed in to report, Your Highness, there's big news. The emperor asked, What is it? The man replied, The Crown Prince is preparing to depart. Everyone was stunned. What? Depart? Where is the Crown Prince going? The emperor asked, Where is the boy going? The eunuch replied, He seems to want to go to the Ming Dynasty immediately, Your Highness. He said he cannot delay for another second or moment if he truly cares about the country and its people. The king angrily slammed his hand down on the table. Why would he? That impudent brat! The emperor angrily walked towards the Crown Prince's chambers. Upon seeing 2 eunuchs coming out from inside, he loudly called out, Eunuchs, come here! The 2 eunuchs immediately stepped forward and respectfully bowed. Your humble servants greet Your Highness. He immediately asked, Aren't you eunuchs from the Eastern Palace? Where are you going? One respectfully replied, We humble servants are on our way to the royal secretariat. He asked again, For what reason? The eunuch hesitated for a moment, then stammered that this humble servant received orders to record all the tribute items that have been given to the imperial delegations of the Ming Dynasty since the reign of the late King Taizhou. The emperor heard this and was furious. He raged, his voice hoarse, What, that insolent brat? Scene change at the Queen's palace. A maid hurriedly called out from outside the door, Your Majesty the Queen, there's big news. She turned her head in surprise and asked, What's all this commotion about? The maid said, terrified, Right now, His Highness the Crown Prince is packing his bags to go to the Ming Empire. Upon hearing this, the Queen was truly panicked and asked again, The Crown Prince is going to the Ming Empire. Don't the sages also contemplate what's good for the country and its people, and then share their thoughts? "Why do you think so narrowly?" He replied, "This humble servant only wishes the best for the crown prince." The king flared up, "Is it true, as the crown prince said the other day, that you believe I and my ancestors are unworthy of ruling, and that is why you dare to speak such insolent words?" Chungyum quickly and anxiously explained, "This humble servant dares not harbor such disloyal thoughts. I beg your highness to understand." Another minister thought, "It's true that the Grand Inspector's words were a bit narrow-minded, but it's not worth His Highness oppressing him like this. It's normal to boast about having an excellent child, but using power to oppress those who disagree tarnishes a king's dignity." Yi Hyung also thought father is revealing his true nature again. A moment later, he returned to the Eastern Palace, closed the door, and sighed in relief. That was tense. What would have happened if I hadn't been able to fabricate an example of division of labor? Now that I think about it, father has been summoning me very often lately. I only wanted father to pay a little attention to me, but it seems I've dug my own grave. I didn't even know that the concept of division of labor didn't exist in this era. Even before Adam Smith mentioned the concept of division of labor, it had always occurred naturally. However, what made the division of labor a rule in industry was the consensus between absolute monarchy and the principle of market regulation. What about absolute monarchy in Joseon? Although nominally an absolute monarchy, from a historical perspective, it was a power struggle between the monarch, who wanted to maintain absolute monarchy, and the officials, who wanted a republican system. And the people wanted a semi-republican government. The monarch loves his subjects more than himself. Only then can the people's interests be guaranteed, and only then can they have real power. Success cannot be achieved overnight. I will have to build it step by step. Consolidating the king's power. Father would also want to do that. I must ensure father's power reaches even the most remote parts of the country, and to do that I need money. Decided I will fill the national coffers first. Then he left the Eastern Palace and went to the main hall. The emperor asked in surprise, "What are you doing here?" He replied, "I have something to say about the envoy delegation preparing to go to the Ming dynasty. There is something that needs to be confirmed by the Ming emperor." Others who heard him were surprised, thinking, "What's the crown prince's purpose this time?" Yi Hyung said, "I have something to say about the envoy delegation about to go to the Ming dynasty. There is something that needs to be confirmed by the Ming emperor." And the emperor was curious. "What is it?" he thought. "What is it this time?" He smiled, faintly calculating. The first way to fill the national coffers is to obtain a monopoly on golden pens. First, we must ensure that Joseon merchants gain a monopoly on the trade of golden pens in the Ming dynasty. The Ming emperor keeps demanding more golden pens as tribute, so clearly, the Ming dynasty seems to really like this type of pen. The Ming dynasty is several times larger than Joseon, so as I said the other day, the demand for golden pens is also many times higher. Next, regarding the Ming dynasty envoys, every time they come to our country, they demand a lot of tribute items. Therefore, we must obtain an imperial decree to prevent their envoy delegation from making such demands. Chungyum impulsively shouted, "Your Highness, that is impossible. The Ming court views Joseon as a vassal state. How can a vassal state dare to complain about the people of the mother country? That is extremely impolite." Yi Hyung questioned, "Where is the impoliteness? Do you mean that people from a big country have the right to bully a small country?" He said, "The problem is not there. If we suddenly decide to reduce tribute items compared to the usual practice, there will surely be serious consequences." Yi Hyung thought, annoyed. "This old man keeps opposing me." Then he said, "Where do you think those tribute items come from? Aren't they painstakingly produced by the people of our country? Furthermore, the amount of tribute demanded by the Ming dynasty is constantly increasing, meaning the food for our people is constantly decreasing. At this rate, even the taxes collected into the national coffers will decrease. Shouldn't we resolve this risk before it happens?" Chungyum retorted, "That is because His Highness the Crown Prince still does not understand state affairs. The people in the envoy delegation are all eunuchs, the closest servants to the emperor. If they speak ill of our country to the emperor, we could be in danger." Yi Hyung replied, "Do you really think the Ming emperor is that foolish?" He said, "That is not what this humble servant means. It's just that your highness is still too young, and this humble servant fears you might cause a great loss for a small gain." Yi Hyang angrily asked, "What does that have to do with my age? And you just said causing a great loss for a small gain, didn't you?" he continued. "Every time the Ming Dynasty envoy delegation comes, the tribute items they take away block 5 li of road. Isn't that wealth they stole from Joseon's national coffers, and its people sages of old once said that the duty of officials is to ensure the people can live peacefully. But you keep demanding that we grovel and serve those eunuchs. Why is that?" Chung Yum said, "You are exaggerating. We are not groveling, we are just—" Yi Hyang interrupted. "I haven't finished speaking. Mencius once said that a virtuous person, even in the most luxurious place, still demonstrates benevolence. Even when holding the highest position, they maintain integrity and always steadfastly follow the path of virtue. Is bowing down offering wealth to those eunuchs and flattering them consistent with any of those 3 things? If so, do you still dare to call yourselves virtuous gentlemen?" Then he knelt down and pleaded, "Please, Father, allow your humble son to lead this envoy delegation. Your humble son will implore the Ming Emperor and do everything possible to end this wrong custom. Please, Father, grant permission," he continued. "It is true that I am still young, only 9 years old, but my determination is higher than the tallest mountain." The emperor rubbed his forehead and said, "Crown Prince, the road to Beijing is very long and arduous." Yi Hyang continued, "Joseon's current situation is both a danger and an opportunity. If we know how to take advantage of it, it will be the foundation for development for thousands of years to come. But if we fail, we will forever remain a small, isolated nation. I hope Father understands your humble son." The king said, "Crown Prince, return to your palace." He then called Eunuch. "The Crown Prince seems overly agitated. Take him back to the palace and calm him down." Yi Hyang shouted, "Father, please let me go, Father." Upon returning to the Eastern Palace, he angrily shouted, "Everyone out, damn it, I was too agitated." Sitting alone in the palace, he pondered, "Damn that Chung Yum. He looks down on me because I'm young. He's been picking on me since last time. I won't sit idly by. Just you wait, you bastards." Then he called Eunuch, "Prepare for a trip to the Ming Dynasty." The eunuch was startled. "What? Why suddenly? I told you to prepare my belongings." And at this moment in the main hall, the official said, "We cannot do as the Crown Prince says, Your Highness. We beg Your Highness to understand us." The king sighed. "Do you know how long that child sleeps in a day? Never more than 6 hours. A 9-year-old child knows how to think of ways to make the nation wealthy, yet all you know how to say is no." No, the officials bowed. "We humble servants deserve 1,000 deaths. We humble servants deserve 1,000 deaths." Suddenly, someone rushed in to report, "Your Highness, there's big news." The emperor asked, "What is it?" The man replied, "The Crown Prince is preparing to depart." Everyone was stunned. "What depart? Where is the Crown Prince going?" The emperor asked, "Where is the boy going?" The eunuch replied, "He seems to want to go to the Ming Dynasty immediately, Your Highness. He said he cannot delay for another second or moment if he truly cares about the country and its people." The king angrily slammed his hand down on the table. "Why would he, that impudent brat?" The emperor angrily walked towards the Crown Prince's chambers. Upon seeing 2 eunuchs coming out from inside, he loudly called out, "Eunuchs, come here!" The 2 eunuchs immediately stepped forward and respectfully bowed. "Your humble servants greet Your Highness." He immediately asked, "Aren't you eunuchs from the Eastern Palace? Where are you going?" One respectfully replied, "We humble servants are on our way to the Royal Secretariat." He asked again, "For what reason?" The eunuch hesitated for a moment, then stammered, "That this humble servant received orders to record all the tribute items that have been given to the imperial delegations of the Ming Dynasty since the reign of the late King Taizhou." The emperor heard this and was furious. He raged, his voice hoarse, "What? That insolent brat! Scene change at the Queen's palace." A maid hurriedly called out from outside the door, "Your Majesty the Queen! There's big news!" She turned her head in surprise and asked, "What's all this commotion about?" The maid said, terrified, "Right now, His Highness the Crown Prince is packing his bags to go to the Ming Empire. Upon hearing this, the queen was truly panicked and asked again, "The crown prince is going to the Ming Empire," as if going for a stroll in a village. "Why is that?" The person quickly replied, "He said it was to prevent the Ming imperial envoys from demanding excessive tribute items. The minister of the Ministry of Justice said he was overreacting, so the crown prince said he would go there himself." A moment later, the person added, "And His Majesty is on his way to the Eastern Palace." Hearing this, she frowned, her face clearly showing tension and worry. Then she quickly left her chambers, running towards the Eastern Palace. As she ran, she worried non-stop, "Yi Hyang, what on earth are you doing?" The servants behind, not understanding what was happening, but seeing the queen so anxious, also quickly followed, calling out, "Your Majesty the Queen!" At the crown prince's side, the king could not contain his anger and pointed at him, scolding, "You impudent brat! What is this impulsive behavior?" Yi Hyang replied with a firm voice, "I am not impulsive. I am doing what I must as a crown prince." Outside the chambers, the officials stood in a line. No one dared to step inside. The king's angry voice did not cease. "You scoundrel! Do you know how old you are to be doing this?" Yi Hyang replied, "Age is not an obstacle to doing the right thing. It is merely an excuse for saying what one is not old enough to do." The king grew even angrier upon hearing this, questioning, "Why are you acting so recklessly? Queen Consort Yoon or Queen Sohaeon had just arrived." She gasped, calling out, "Yi Hyang." At this moment, the crown prince still refused to back down and spoke with a resolute tone. "If father is the father of our people, then I want to be the eldest brother. Every time an envoy delegation comes and goes, my brothers lament. Then, as their elder brother, how can I remain silent?" The king was so enraged by his son that he gnashed his teeth, scolding, "You impudent brat! In the end, where is the royal attendant? Bring me the whip and the torture bench." The queen and the people outside gasped in shock. She was so worried that she rushed into the chambers, shouting, "Your Highness!" The people behind also cried out in fear, "Your Majesty the Queen!" The queen opened the door and immediately said loudly, "Your Highness, the crown prince is only 9 years old." The king frowned and replied, "Because he is young, he must be disciplined and taught. Queen, you may not interfere." Then he commanded the 2 eunuchs, "Eunuchs, escort the queen out." She heard this and cried out in panic, "Your Highness!" Before being led out by the 2 eunuchs, she still tried to plead, "Your Highness, please have mercy." "Your Highness," whip after whip descended upon the crown prince's legs. The king whipped once and scolded once. "Your first mistake is that you are too arrogant with your meager knowledge. Your second mistake is disrespecting your servants and not knowing how to behave." Though young, the crown prince did not cry or fuss under the beating, only gritted his teeth and endured. By now the crown prince's legs were marked with whip welts, but the king showed no mercy and continued to beat and scold. "Your third mistake is disregarding your father's command. Repent for what you have done today, and ensure this behavior never happens again." The queen outside, hearing this, cried her heart out. The officials also nervously looked towards the chambers. The door finally opened after a while of discipline. The king, panting, stepped out and instructed, "Summon the royal physicians to treat the crown prince." The people heard this and obeyed unanimously, replying, "Yes, Your Highness." He walked past the queen, who was still sobbing, and instructed her, "Queen, take care of the crown prince." And he glanced at the officials and left them with a remark, "You are a bunch of petty people worse than a child." An official could not help but say, "How could His Highness the Crown Prince do such a thing?" Another person, seeing the queen still standing by, reminded him, "Silence, Her Majesty, the queen will hear you." The queen then spoke, "You all." Then she turned back towards the officials, her face scowling as she reprimanded them. "Why couldn't you think as thoroughly as that child leading to this situation? I will not forget what happened today." The officials heard this and could only bow their heads, saying, "We humble servants deserve to die." A moment later, in the crown prince's chambers, the queen ceaselessly hit the crown prince's bottom, scolding, "You scoundrel! Why do you keep grieving me? You must not do this. Do you hear?" The crown prince cried loudly, "Mother, it hurts too much." He lay on his stomach thinking it hurt so much. Whether it's my previous life or this one, my calves have had to endure everything. A moment later, he seemed to feel his mother's hand stop hitting him, and he was a little surprised. The queen cried heartbrokenly, then bent down and hugged the crown prince, saying, "This mother now has no one but the two of you." He heard this and replied, "Your humble son apologizes, mother." Scene change. At the morning court session, the king sternly looked down at the people below. Then he turned to the eunuch and said, "Eunuch, bring the documents the crown prince told you to prepare." The eunuch immediately replied, "Yes, your highness." A moment later, the eunuch presented a stack of documents. After reading them, the king sternly said, "The smallest amount of tribute they take is equivalent to 2 months of the treasury. In a year at most, it's up to 5 months. If we include the tribute they take from small villages, the total will be about a year." Saying this, he held up the records and questioned, "Do you see where ministers? This is the list of tribute items presented to the Ming Empire until now. Year after year, the tribute sent to the Ming Empire has steadily increased. What do you ministers think?" Seeing their silent demeanor, the king angrily slammed his seat and said loudly, "Why don't you answer? Even the young crown prince could think of it, and you can't." The officials bowed their heads in unison, saying, "We humble servants apologize, your highness." The king then commanded, "Select the head envoy and assistants within 2 hours and report back to me. If you cannot decide within 2 hours, I will punish all of you for treason." The people immediately replied, "We thank your majesty for your grace." That evening, as the king was gazing at the moon, the queen's voice echoed, "Your highness." He turned and asked, "Is something wrong?" The queen replied, "I came out to get some fresh air because I couldn't sleep." A moment later, she hesitated, saying, "Your highness, why did you punish the crown prince so severely today? I think you are stricter than usual." He was silent for a moment, then replied, "The crown prince is an intelligent child." She heard this and looked up. The king continued, "However, there are times when he gets so carried away with his own intelligence that he faces opposition from the ministers. That is what happened today. A tree that stands too straight easily breaks. If there is no trust from the ministers, how can I take care of my people?" The queen remained silent, looking at him. He continued, "I think the crown prince was born with the disposition of a sage. Therefore, from now on, I will only teach him the best I can so that he may walk on the right path." Hearing this, the queen smiled and replied, "This humble concubine cannot understand the profound meaning behind your actions. I have no other desires if that is what you aim for." After the monarch severely disciplined the crown prince, he immediately ordered the ministers to appoint the head and assistants of the envoy delegation. The crown prince's actions were extreme, but he said nothing wrong. However, it is also true that this extremism exceeded the monarch's limits of tolerance, and His Highness was punished. The crown prince propped his chin, sighing. He was sitting and watching his 2 younger brothers playing in the courtyard, especially the child about his age. That was an important factor. The little boy excitedly playing over there was Yi Yu, my younger brother. However, he is not a normal child because in the near future that child will cause a bloody catastrophe within this palace. That boy is the 7th king of Joseon, King Seiho. As far as I remember, after killing the owner of this body, King Manjong, as soon as his nephew, King Danjong, ascended the throne, he was the one who led Gyeongjongnan to eliminate all opponents during his reign. Not stopping there, he even poisoned his own brother, Grand Prince Anpyeong. To help you understand better, Gyeongjongnan was the great uprising, the coup that took place in 1453, led by King Seiho to eliminate the king's close relations. He remembers his teacher once taught about this Suyang character that he even abandoned his younger brother and older brother, betrayed both his grandfather and his father. He cast a dark shadow over the golden age of the Joseon dynasty. Most historians held negative views towards Grand Prince Suyang. This is something he is extremely worried about. That innocent, clueless bastard will grow up to be a tyrant? Yi Hyang deliberated, "What should I do? I must do something before he shows such signs." Suddenly Yi Hyang smiled as he thought of a way. "I remember. That method is the best way to change a person." He quickly grinned and approached his 2 younger brothers. "Through thorough education from childhood and what I've learned by rote, I will make him work under my command until he dies." King Taejong, a grown man, was so mortified at the prospect of borrowing from his young son that he initially wanted to refuse. To his wife, Queen Wangyang, he exclaimed, "Oh, where will I put my face?" His wife immediately scolded him, "Do you think your honor is more important than our son's education? This will affect our family's future." Coincidentally, it wasn't just King Taejong's family who was curious about Jinho's flashcards. Several other noble households were too, so they banded together to seek an audience with the young crown prince. When they stated their wishes, Jinho shook his head, feigning reluctance, saying, "Oh, those are just things I made for my younger brothers." The officials earnestly pleaded, "Please, your royal highness, then please sell them to us. The price doesn't matter. Just please sell them to us." Jinho sighed and conceded, "If you want them that badly, then I have no choice." He held up 3 small fingers before the officials, requesting the number 3 seom, which was equivalent to 159 kilgis of white rice. This figure was quite high, causing them all to widen their eyes and stammer, "What did you say?" He repeated, "Didn't you hear clearly? It's 159 kilgis of white rice?" The sweating official stammered, "I mean, is this item really worth a full 159 kilgi?" Jinho smiled and said, "This isn't really that expensive." Jinho explained, "One part will be for the cost of materials to make the flashcards, another part will be deposited into the national treasury, and the final part will be for my personal use." The officials hesitated slightly, then asked, "What do you mean by personal use?" He logically replied, "It's to pay for books. For various reasons, the price of books is quite high." They silently looked at each other. Finally, one official couldn't wait any longer and spoke up, "All right, I'll buy them for your royal highness. Lately, my wife has been making a fuss about this." With one person taking the lead, those who followed eagerly raised their hands to place orders. "Me too. I also want to buy them. There are so many people who want to buy the flashcards." Jinho smiled happily and said, "All right then." Jinho was immensely satisfied. "Now I can burn with passion." He had found a way to earn money, but there was still something important. He needed to change his father, King Taejong's health. In King Taejong's chambers, a delicious meal was served. King Taejong looked around anxiously, and only after confirming there were no uninvited guests did he bend down to look at the meat dish on the table. He reached out to pick up a piece of grilled meat when suddenly a loud voice called out from nowhere, "Father King!" startling him and making him drop his chopsticks. The young crown prince burst through the palace doors questioning, "Are you only eating meat again?" King Taejong unhappily muttered, "What's that brat up to now?" Inside the chambers, the sound of the father and son bickering, neither willing to yield, echoed. "You little brat, do you know it's a sin to disturb even a dog while it's eating? But healthy eating is a way to protect your health." The eunuchs outside the door looked at each other, pondering, "Should we lead His Royal Highness out? Wait until His Majesty gives the order?" At the dining table, King Taejong angrily slammed his hand down. "What did you say about my meal not healthy enough? Look here. On this table, there are 3 perfectly colored, flavored, and fragrant dishes: roasted chicken, crispy pork belly, and stir-fried beef with onions." Jinho bluntly picked up a food plate and retorted, "This is healthy. It's all meat. You don't even touch vegetables." King Taejong stammered, unable to argue with the brat. This kind of argument had become a daily occurrence. The kneeling palace servants sighed, "Your Royal Highness, please stop. His Majesty has been living miserably lately." All of this started because Jinho began to pay excessive attention to King Taejong's meals to the point of being abnormal. During work hours, he would sneak in and stand beside him holding a book and muttering, "If we look at the forensic texts of the Yuan dynasty, a diverse diet of vegetables is essential for a long and healthy life." He even went to the royal kitchen to instruct the chefs, "The seasoning is too salty, redo it, and reduce the meat." The servants found it difficult to refuse him. Even while his father was eating, he would sit beside him, grumbling, "Consuming too much meat will cause blood turbidity, Your Majesty. And what happens when blood is turbid? It causes mental and physical tension. And when the mind and body are tense, what then? If you're not careful, it can even affect your head, Your Majesty. And what will happen to the nation if your head is affected? the stability of this nation will be shaken. Whenever he ate, the crown prince's nagging voice would be in his ear, complaining about this and that. It's all for father's sake. Then endlessly rambling. The surrounding servants, seeing the furious twitch in his eye, knew that the king was about to lose his temper. The kneeling servants predicted, "The king we know will surely explode now." Just as they thought, King Taejong finally couldn't take it anymore and yelled, "You brat! I've been lenient with you because you're young, but I can't stand it anymore." He pointed at Jin-ho and cursed, "Don't you dare interfere with your father king's meals anymore." Even a ghost that dies after eating has its own unique characteristics and charm. He angrily ordered, "Someone take the crown prince out of here immediately. Don't let him in here while I'm eating." Jin-ho, helplessly grabbed by the collar and dragged out, could only try to call out his father's name. "I can't let this happen. At this rate, the old man will get sick soon. He has to be healthy to rule for a long time. Only then can I live comfortably in the future." He stood dazed outside the chambers while the servant who had just dragged him out bowed and said, "My apologies, Your Royal Highness." His mind raced. Watching his diet will be difficult now. What should I do? How can I make that old man live healthily? While he was deep in thought inside, King Taejong ordered, "Someone bring more meat." Suddenly, Jin-ho had an idea. "Oh, that's right, there's another way." He quickly began preparing for his grand project to ensure his father's health. He went to the professional woodcarving workshop in the palace and set to work. The carvers were pestered by him day and night. "No, make it rounder." The carver immediately replied, "Yes, Your Royal Highness." Jin-ho's actions made everyone wonder, why is His Royal Highness making us carve such strange things? It seemed that from that day on he came there more frequently. After a while, a carver presented the finished product to him. "Your Royal Highness, it's complete." But when Jin-ho held the item in his hand, just a slight bit of force was enough to break it in half. He furiously yelled, "No, it's not like that. Do it again immediately. This time make it stronger." And so throughout the workshop, the Crown Prince's insistent demands echoed, "Do it again. Rounder, even rounder." A few days later, Jin-ho confidently appeared in the audience hall among the civil and military officials. Upon seeing him, King Taejong was at a loss for words, and the other officials were equally surprised. Jin-ho, with both hands, presented a set of items before the king. King Taejong asked, "What is this now?" Jin-ho replied, "This item was created for your majesty's health, Father King. This is a durable jump rope and a jingle bell." King Taejong asked suspiciously, "Is this truly good for my health? Isn't it just a regular rope?" Jin-ho explained, "It's not just a regular rope." He smiled and said, "This is an excellent plan to take care of your majesty's health, Father King." Jin-ho had prepared day and night, and finally presented King Taejong with a jump rope and a bell to wear as tools for managing his health. He said, "This is a good way to help Father King maintain his health. It's called rope jumping." Upon hearing this, King Taejong was not entirely convinced by his words. He wondered how a jump rope could make him healthy. Seeing is believing. So Jin-ho took his product and said, "Your humble son requests permission to demonstrate." King Taejong nodded and granted, "I permit it." First he put the jingle bell around his neck. Next, holding the jump rope with both hands, he swung his arms and performed the most basic jump rope exercise that any modern person would know before the eyes of the entire court and King Taejong. After a while, he stopped panting and said, "That's how you use the jump rope." King Taejong still didn't understand how this related to his health. He widened his eyes and asked, "Isn't that just regular jumping? Are you saying that will make me healthier?" Speaking with evidence. Jin-ho picked up a book of Western scholarship and replied, "Yes, Your Majesty. According to Western scholars, those who sit a lot often have weaker lower bodies. But this book states that jumping rope will strengthen Father King's legs." He didn't forget to cast a mysterious glance at the officials around the court, then whispered, "Furthermore, there's another benefit." Having piqued everyone's curiosity, he feigned innocence and said, "It's very good for men, but your humble son doesn't know how to describe it." This hit the bullseye. If it was just about general health, the men present would only half listen. But when that health was mentioned, everyone's ears perked up. King Taejong was no exception. He asked with a serious expression, "Is that true?" Jinho nodded vigorously. "Yes, it's true. Your humble son is certain." King Taejong's heart immediately wavered. It looks strange, but it doesn't seem much different from regular jumping. And the boy said it also helps with that other thing. He asked again, "I just have to swing the rope and jump over it, right?" Jinho nodded, pointed to the bell on his neck, and said, "That's right, Father King. You just need to jump to the rhythm of this bell." Jinho turned to the servant beside him and called, "Chief Palace Steward." The old man beside him stepped forward and bowed. "Yes, Your Royal Highness." Jinho took off the bell and gave it to the steward to put on His Majesty. He instructed, "When Father King jumps rope, you must count 100 times according to the sound of the bell." This servant understands clearly. He also used touching words to urge King Taejong to do this exercise. "My humble son's greatest wish is for Father King to live long and healthily." At this point, King Taejong indulged Jinho's wishes and moved to a more spacious outdoor courtyard to practice. Jinho happily said, "Father King, your humble son will tie the bell here." King Taejong's eyes widened. "Do I really have to wear it?" Jinho diligently fastened the bell onto him and replied, "Yes, Your Majesty, wear it to keep rhythm." King Taejong hesitated, saying, "But this makes me look a bit like a pig." Jinho hadn't thought of it, but upon hearing it, he had to admit it was true. He snorted with laughter, spitting a little. King Taejong grumbled, "What are you laughing at?" Jinho wouldn't admit it, replying, "Nothing, Your Majesty. There, it's ready now." Before starting the jump rope exercise, King Taejong hesitated slightly. "Do I really need to do this? It doesn't seem right." Jinho reassured the king, "You'll get used to it slowly, Your Majesty." And so King Taejong accepted the exercise. He swung the rope and took his first jumps. Due to his plump physique and lack of previous exercise after just a few jumps, King Taejong was out of breath. He stopped and asked the chief palace steward, "It's not as easy as I thought. Chief Steward, how many times did I jump just now?" The chief steward immediately replied truthfully, "9 times, Your Royal Highness." King Taejong was startled. "Only 9 times?" He turned to negotiate with the Crown Prince. "Crown Prince, since this is the first time today, shouldn't we reduce the number of jumps?" The Crown Prince crossed his arms and shook his head. "No, Your Majesty, you must try harder," he declared. "Your humble son will stay here until Father King jumps 100 times." And this statement truly made King Taejong want to cry. Some time passed, and the story of King Taejong diligently practicing jump rope became a widespread topic of discussion throughout the palace. The officials gathered together. One person rushed in and asked, "Are you still here?" 2 royal physicians standing nearby asked, "What's wrong?" The person who arrived said with a serious expression, "That's not important. What's important is that His Majesty just coughed and immediately ran to use the plum blossom chamber pot. Because he was the emperor, the plum blossom chamber pot was the exclusive chamber pot for the king." This news was quite shocking because after he began daily jump rope exercises, King Taejong had changed a lot. Previously, he would often only have a bowel movement every 3 days, but now he could do so every day, causing the palace servants to congratulate His Majesty. He could also stay up later to process petitions, and for some reason, he also frequently visited the Queen's chambers more often, which is where the Queen resided. Rumors quickly spread among the officials. "Have you heard His Majesty exercises with the jump rope and uses the plum blossom chamber pot immediately after coughing? Lately, His Majesty's complexion has also improved significantly. It seems all for the same reason. Don't tell me it's because of the jump rope." One official nodded in confirmation. "It seems so." They sighed and shared, "These days I don't feel so well. I haven't been sleeping well lately either. As for me, my wife complains every night." As soon as they finished speaking, they exchanged knowing glances. So one afternoon, while the Crown Prince Jinho was reading, he suddenly heard a despairing, desperate cry, "Crown Prince!" He looked up in surprise, and before him were all the court officials bustling towards him. Jinho asked, alarmed, "What's wrong?" The officials frankly asked, "Your Royal Highness, can you make more jump ropes? We'll pay as many kilograms of rice as you want. I want to buy one for my wife and children." This person contended with that person, "And one more for me." The scene was as chaotic as a kindergarten classroom. Jin-ho loudly said, "Please, one person at a time, one person only." The venture was more successful than expected. Jin-ho reappeared at the carving workshop, urging them, "We have to make a lot, so from now on you all must divide the work one person makes. The ropes, one person makes the handles, and one person makes the bells." The workers with tears in their eyes resignedly muttered, "The Crown Prince is exploiting our labor. Now start making another 500. In their hearts they were in pain. "Please, just kill us, we are human too." But it didn't stop there. Jin-ho took out a blueprint and said, "I also need to add this." The craftsman worriedly thought, "What is it this time?" He handed the blueprint to a servant and instructed, "Take this to the royal tailor." The servant asked, "What is this, your royal highness?" Jin-ho explained, "This is because wearing skirts while jumping rope will be uncomfortable. So, for them to move more easily, I designed this type of clothing. These are convenient athletic trousers." Jin-ho's combination of products created a health revolution for the officials' families. When the whole family jumped rope and the husband was healthy, the wife was happy, and the whole household was joyful. Everyone praised him generously. "With this, everything I do is easier now. Something so small has such a big effect. Clearly, the Crown Prince is a genius." Not only were the households happy, but Jin-ho, after accumulating white rice from the officials and filling his private granary, was equally delighted. Standing before the rice storage, Jin-ho put his hands on his hips and laughed loudly. "I'm making money faster than I thought, but it's still not enough, I want more." While some praised him, others criticized him. Some conservative officials began to whisper, "The Crown Prince's inventions have made him very famous. I heard the Crown Prince even sold them to the high-ranking ministers, didn't he?" They pointed fingers, judging, "Collecting money is not what a wise person should do. That's right, we cannot just sit idly by." A high-ranking official spoke up, "Calm down, wait for an opportunity. There's a saying, using a small amount to achieve a great deal. If the Crown Prince becomes arrogant because of this and cannot explain his reasoning, he will destroy himself." Time passed, and it was time for the envoy mission to Beijing to depart. Instead of simply having foreign trade delegations accompany the envoys, Jin-ho proposed building resting pavilions for the envoy delegations along the road to the Ming dynasty. King Taejong heard this and told his close retainers to consider Jin-ho's proposal, and ordered the envoy mission to convey this suggestion to the Ming dynasty. The envoy mission departed, and time continued to pass. At the palace, Jin-ho was standing gazing at the sky and clouds when a girl's voice called out, "Hey Jin-ho, look at this! Do you know what this is?" Crown Prince Munjong's older sister, Princess Jongso, presented colorful sculpted cakes to the protagonist. Jin-ho thought for a moment, then he stammered, "Is it yakgwa?" Jongso burst out laughing playfully, hitting Jin-ho's shoulder. "Wrong. The correct answer is dasik. What have you been studying for 100 days if you don't even know this? Dasik is a type of Korean snack usually served with tea." Jongso continued to tease, "You should go out and take a walk instead of just holing up in the palace reading books. If you keep this up, you'll end up just like Father King." Jin-ho, hearing his sister's words, immediately thought of King Taejong's plump, round figure and trembled with anger. He retorted bitterly, "I'm much better than you, sister." Jongso paid no mind, walking forward with that same smile, saying, "I don't think so. Well, study hard today too, okay?" The princess politely greeted the eunuch, who kindly asked, "Did Her Highness sleep well?" A princess was a title usually bestowed upon the daughters of kings. Jin-ho walked and pondered, "It's like a joke she never sits still. But at her age, that's normal, right? My sister, Princess Jongso, the one laughing brightly over there. In 2 years, she will cause the entire palace to be shaken with grief because she will die of smallpox." Smallpox at that time was a disease that has now been completely eradicated, but it was once considered the most terrifying disease in human history. It caused fever and widespread rashes leading to severe skin damage. The mortality rate for this disease in the Middle Ages reached up to 30%. That's why people said smallpox tigers and war were the most terrible disasters in the world. King Taejong was very saddened when the princess died. After all, she was Father King's firstborn. "So I won't let that happen." Jin-ho's face was filled with determination. "All right, I'll solve this problem because I have a way. The scene shifted. Jin-ho was standing before a cow. He asked the old farmer, "Does this cow have cowpox?" The owner of the cow knelt respectfully, saying, "Yes, your royal highness." Jin-ho smirked. "That's right, cowpox will be the key." The guards beside him watched bewildered. What is the crown prince planning now? This place was Nelbyon Island, currently known as Jeju Island. In this era, this area was not suitable for agriculture, so animal husbandry was more common here than farming. Jin-ho asked the kneeling farmers, "Are you the only ones who raise cattle?" One person spoke up, "Yes, your royal highness." Then he continued, "Which of you has never had smallpox? Raise your hand." A farmer in a brown shirt raised his hand, reporting, "This humble one, your royal highness." Jin-ho continued to ask, "After you started raising cattle, did you get sick?" The farmer replied, "No, your royal highness. This humble one has been like this since before coming to Nelbyon Island." The protagonist wondered, "Has Nelbyon Island ever had a smallpox epidemic?" The farmer continued, "Every year there's at least one case before the weather turns cold." The crown prince asked in confusion, "Then why didn't any of you get smallpox?" The farmers were silent for a moment, then honestly replied, "To be honest, our physicians and landlords don't believe it, but we know a secret method to prevent the disease." Hearing this, Jin-ho's face relaxed and he smiled slightly. "I knew it." Edward Jenner, who invented the first smallpox vaccine, also did something similar. The villagers in his hometown were once infected with cowpox from cows. He heard that those who were infected with this disease from animals would not get smallpox anymore. After many experiments, he saved humanity with a technique called inoculation. Jin-ho asked the farmers, "Does anyone here know that secret method?" The man in white immediately reported, "This humble one knows." Then Jin-ho said, "Can you perform it on me?" The farmer looked bewildered, thinking he had misheard. "What, your royal highness?" Jin-ho's face was very determined, holding a sharp needle. "That secret method, I want you to perform it on me." The farmer was horrified, unable to believe his ears. "What, your royal highness?" At the palace, King Taejong was sitting listening to his retainers present petitions. His expression was grim. "We need to raise taxes. There's truly no other way." Suddenly, a chief palace steward rushed in frantically reporting, "Your Majesty, there's big news." The king, sitting majestically on his throne, calmly asked, "What is it?" The chief palace steward whispered into the king's ear, "The crown prince." King Taejong was horrified, losing his composure. "What, is that true? Where is the crown prince now?" The retainers, hearing the king raise his voice like that, didn't understand what was happening. "What is it? What's going on?" Hearing what the chief steward said, the crown prince had just returned to the palace, and immediately King Taejong rushed out shouting in fright, "Crown prince, no!" Seeing the king's haste, the retainers also quickly followed. King Taejong continuously called out his son's name. He saw his son's figure walking ahead and called out loudly from afar. Hearing the call, both servants and master were surprised. King Taejong rushed over, agitated. "There you are! Are you hurt anywhere?" Jin-ho didn't understand why his father was reacting this way and stammered, "No, your Majesty." "What's wrong, Father King?" King Taejong's face darkened, full of murderous intent, and he turned to say, "Chief Palace Steward, explain this to me." The Chief Palace Steward stammered, "Your Royal Highness, this humble one only repeated what Eunuch Oh said." King Taejong called out Eunuch Oh's name. "What in the world is going on?" Eunuch Oh immediately knelt down, admitting his fault. "This humble servant deserves to die, but this humble servant truly did not lie." King Taejong retorted impatiently, "Are you joking with me?" At this moment, Jin-ho, who was behind them, spoke up. "Father King, that eunuch spoke the truth. Your humble son thinks it's about what happened on Nelbyon Island." King Taejong heard this and was confused, wondering, "What crown prince? What are you talking about?" Jin-ho continued. But he misunderstood. And Jin-ho explained, "Isn't there a disease that occasionally becomes an epidemic and infects the people of Joseon?" King Taejong heard this, and it sounded familiar. "You mean smallpox?" Jin-ho excitedly replied. "That's right, your Majesty. While reading Chinese medical texts, your humble son found a remedy for this disease. So based on that method, your humble son took cowpox pus from a cow and inoculated himself with it." King Taejong heard his precious son's words and his head spun. He couldn't believe it and promptly collapsed to the ground. Both the retainers and Jin Ho worriedly yelled, "Father King, wake up! Father King!" After that shock, King Taejong regained consciousness. His face pale and distraught, he asked Jin Ho, "So you're saying you injected cowpox pus into your body?" Jin Ho calmly replied, "That's right, Your Majesty," without a hint of hesitation. Then King Taejong, thinking of the cow, still couldn't believe it, and continued to speak to Jin Ho, "You probably don't know what pus is, do you? There's no way you would have—" Before he finished, Jin Ho laughed and continued, "It really is pus, Father King. It flows from the cow's wound." Hearing this, King Taejong suppressed his anger and said, "The procedure your humble son mentioned, you mean you just applied it to the skin, right?" But Jin Ho frankly replied, "Your humble son took a needle and injected it into my body." Hearing this, King Taejong was utterly furious. He stepped forward, grabbed the boy's shoulders and shouted, "You rebellious brat! How dare you do such a thing? Just because it's written in a book, you dared to follow it." Then Jin Ho explained, "Father King, your humble son is fine. A skilled person did it for your humble son himself." King Taejong was greatly surprised and exclaimed, "What, who?" Then Jin Ho pointed and said it was him. The farmer flustered immediately, bowed and knelt, reporting, "This humble subject greets your royal highness." Jin Ho then introduced, "This man is your humble son's servant in the future." "Ah, no, your humble son means he is a cowherd from Nelbian Island. He performed that procedure. He said this is a secret technique passed down through generations used to cure smallpox on Nelbian Island." King Taejong heard this and asked, "A cowherd?" The farmer immediately replied, "Yes, Your Majesty, it was this humble one." King Taejong approached Jin Ho and gently asked, "My crown prince, you said he is a wise man. You mean that cowherd?" Then Jin Ho clearly replied, "Yes, he is the one who cured all the people on the island." But King Taejong loudly said to him, "Even so, you didn't need to experiment with the cure on yourself." "What were you thinking? You are the crown prince." Jin Ho, hearing this, replied, "All lives are equal. Father King, there is no nobility or lowliness in matters of life and death. Many people have been cured and become healthy, so why should your humble son be afraid?" King Taejong replied, worriedly, "But doing that is too reckless. What if something goes wrong?" Hearing this, Jin Ho sighed and pondered for a moment, then he said, "Your humble son is certain you also know that too many people have lost their lives to smallpox in this country, Father King. Your humble son believes that one day it will spread to the palace. If your humble son can prove this cure is effective, won't we be able to protect both our subjects and those we cherish?" Father King. King Taejong heard this and felt completely convinced. He stood silently for a long time, then sighed, thinking to himself, "I truly can't tell if this child will be a blessing or a misfortune for Joseon. Now his actions and gestures are exactly like those of a sage. There will be times when he's like an unsatisfied bolt of lightning, even if it strikes a rock continuously for 100 days. After that, King Taejong ordered the guards take this man to prison, feed him well, and remember not to interrogate him. Then King Taejong looked at the cowherd and said, "If anything happens to the crown prince, I will immediately take your life. However, there will be a generous reward if your words are true." The cowherd trembled and replied, "This humble servant understands, Your Majesty." At this moment, the chief censor was talking to the astronomer, Li Chun. The chief censor spoke up. "Hey, have you heard about the crown prince? He said he was cured of smallpox after being treated by that lowly servant. The crown prince even injected that disgusting cowpox pus into himself." Li Chun replied, "It sounds absurd, but if it's the crown prince, he must have his own reasons. He can create things no one else would think of. Above all, the crown prince studies diligently in his chamber. This time he surely—" Before he could finish, two people ran past worriedly shouting, "His Royal Highness the Crown Prince!" Then Li Chun asked, "What's all the commotion about? Eunuch?" "Oh," hurriedly replied, "it's a big deal. The Crown Prince has—" At the Crown Prince's residence, Jin-ho was lying in bed, his body burning with a high fever, but he still insisted, "I'm fine." The servant said, "How can you be fine? Your Royal Highness, your body is hot like a fireball." The servant then angrily said, "So-don, that scoundrel, I will—" Meanwhile, So-don was tied to a chair. The prison warden yelled, "You scoundrel! How dare you mock the royal family and endanger His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince?" So-don, confused, exclaimed, "What's wrong?" "Your Excellency," the warden replied, "are you going to lie again? It's not as you said. The Crown Prince is suffering a torturous death." Hearing this, So-don spoke up. "Ah, are you perhaps talking about the Crown Prince having a fever?" The warden said in surprise. "What? How do you know?" Then So-don explained, "You don't need to worry about that. Usually a high fever can last for 5 days, but after another 10 days he will wake up as healthy as if his body has been cleansed." The warden was surprised to hear this, but in the end, So-don's words proved true. Exactly 10 days later, Jin-ho was completely cured and continued living as if nothing had happened, just as before. At the palace, Jin-ho stood before King Taejong and presented, "Look, your humble son has completely escaped the threat of smallpox." King Taejong pondered for a moment, then replied, "I cannot confirm this is true just based on this." Then Jin-ho offered a solution. "Then let your humble son go to where smallpox is rampant and prove it to Father King." King Taejong immediately said no. Then Jin-ho continued, "Then what about this, Father King? We will use this method to treat everyone in the area where the smallpox epidemic has broken out. Your humble son believes that the people there will be cured if they are clearly explained to." Suddenly the chief censor standing behind them said, "We cannot do that. Your Royal Highness, this could just be a coincidence. Furthermore, isn't the Crown Prince's method forcing people to use this treatment?" Jin-ho was silent for a moment, then replied, "Chief Censor, this is what So-don and his family have been doing for decades. How can you say this is a mere coincidence? And since we plan to accept requests to perform this method, there is no compulsion. Everything in this world only develops after many trials." Jin-ho continued, "If we don't try to escape the fear of failure, what will be the fate of our kingdom?" Everyone heard this and said nothing. The chief censor stood there clicking his tongue, his face full of anger. After that, at Jin-ho's suggestion, areas where epidemics frequently occurred were prioritized and this treatment method began to be implemented. Those with a great fear of smallpox readily participated, and its effectiveness would soon be proven. Furthermore, King Taejong requested an investigation along with the smallpox vaccine, hitting 2 birds with 1 stone, the vaccine, and a census verified the effectiveness of this method. King Taejong then had this method propagated throughout Joseon. At this moment, Jin-ho was walking when he heard a voice calling, "Jin-ho, look. Do you know what this is?" It was Jongso. Jin-ho replied, "Is it a sogo?" Jongso replied, "That's right. As a reward for you, your sister will give you a performance with this." Jongso didn't play the instrument as well as Jin-ho, but he still had to listen to the end. Jongso told Jin-ho, "Don't just sit there studying all day, you should enjoy art like this too. You seem to have gained a little weight, haven't you?" At this moment, someone came to call the princess. "Let's go, Princess." Jongso, hearing this, bid farewell to Jin-ho. She said, "Well then, your sister is leaving now." Jin-ho secretly thought to himself, "She always says what she wants, then leaves." Seeing the happy figure of the princess walking away, Jin-ho also smiled. "After all, it's good that she's still healthy, my sister." After the smallpox issue was somewhat resolved, Jin-ho immersed himself in policy planning. He reorganized medical records and compiled them into books, a summary of Korean folk remedies and the truth about farming. He also wrote another book summarizing farming methods more suitable for Joseon's climate. Furthermore, Jin-ho proposed policies for various other fields, including drawing a new map. Jin-ho looked at the results of his work and smiled with satisfaction. Everything is a foundation to comprehensively increase efficiency. Occasionally, some ministers would object, but Jin-ho largely ignored them bluntly. That's why there was the name Sleepless 6 Ministries Street, the administrative center of Joseon's capital, where activities on this street were always bustling and non-stop, hence the name. As night fell, King Taejong, as the emperor ruling the entire nation, looked up at the star-filled sky, many thoughts on his mind. The king turned and instructed, "Historian, don't follow me anymore." The official was uneasy, but "Your Majesty," King Taejong reassured him, "I just want to talk to my son privately." He looked into Jinho's chambers and saw the oil lamp still lit, clearly indicating he was still awake. An official stepped forward to report, "This humble servant heard that the crown prince often stays awake until 1 a.m., sometimes even 3 a.m. when he should be going to bed around 9 to 11 p.m. King Taejong heard this and wondered, so young yet working so hard. In his chambers, Jinho was engrossed in writing something when he heard a servant announce, "His Royal Highness the King has arrived," making him notice. Jinho put down his brush and went to greet his father. "Father King, it's so late, why are you here?" King Taejong calmly walked through the door. "I was taking a stroll but saw your room light was still on, so I stopped by. What are you doing so late that you're not asleep yet?" Jinho honestly replied, "Your humble son is reading." King Taejong asked suspiciously, "Really? Is it a Western book?" "What is it about?" Jinho replied, "The title is Alchemy." King Taejong heard this and was confused. "Alchemy? What is that?" Jinho replied, "It's the study of how to transform iron or lead into gold through various methods." King Taejong stroked his chin, pondering his son's words. Transforming iron into gold is possible? Since his father asked, Jinho could only report, "Unfortunately, according to the book, it's not possible, but those experiments still have meaning. Medieval alchemy greatly influenced the formation of modern chemistry." King Taejong, feeling curious, said to his son, "May I look at that book?" Jinho replied, "Yes, Your Majesty. Your humble son has a translated version. Would Father King like to read it together?" Holding the book in his hand, King Taejong read for a while, then said, "No, I'm just curious what Western writing looks like." A few hours later, Jinho yawned widely. "I'm so sleepy I can't take it anymore. I just want to go to sleep immediately." However, the person sitting in front of him, his father, was still diligently reading the book. Jinho felt admiration. "Father King, aren't you tired? You're reading so intently." King Taejong even praised Western writing as interesting, while Jinho didn't find it interesting at all. King Taejong called his son over to look. He pointed to a line of text on the paper. Based on where this word appears, it seems to refer to the object being talked about in the sentence. And if I see that most sentences begin with these letters, then this part must correspond to the first syllable, this part to the middle syllable, and this part to the final syllable of the word. Jinho sat listening to King Taejong's words astonished. This person is a genius, no a monster. In such a short time, Father King has deduced the spelling and semantic structure of Latin. Seeing his son silent for a while, King Taejong asked, "Is that right?" Jinho hurriedly replied, "Yes, that's correct, Your Majesty." King Taejong continued, "These Western letters are different from Chinese characters. They all look similar. It seems their usage also changes based on the arrangement of the letters." Then he rubbed his chin, looking at the lines of text and pondering. A moment later, he called his son's name. Jinho immediately responded. King Taejong began, "Looking at this, I suddenly thought, what do you think about creating an alphabet system for our own Joseon?" Jinho's eyes widened in surprise. He quickly replied, "For a long time, your humble son has thought that our Joseon needs its own writing system. Even among those who know Chinese characters, only a few are proficient, isn't that right?" King Taejong hesitated, replying, "But if I publicly declare that I want to create a separate writing system, the Hall of Worthies will immediately oppose me." And the Hall of Worthies was a place that gathered talented people founded by King Taejong and was the core research institution for Confucian-oriented policies. Hearing his father's words, Jinho immediately replied, "But there are many people who cannot write petitions just because they don't know characters. If Father King explains this appropriately, everything will go smoothly." King Taejong, hearing his legitimate son say this, burst out laughing. "Jinho, it seems, you've always had difficulty writing, haven't you?" He just smiled awkwardly, but in truth he also found it difficult in his heart. King Taejong recounted his own story. I remember that before I also struggled immensely to write the first sentence. I had to think and write a poem for 2 hours, but your grandfather just laughed when he saw it. Then King Taejong stood up, walked to the door, and said, "It seems I've stayed a bit too long. You should go to sleep quickly." The protagonist bowed and replied, "Yes, Father King. You should also go to sleep, Your Majesty. Joseon can only be stable if you are healthy." King Taejong heard this and was pleased. He looked at Jinho with eyes full of love. "This child, I hope you reach the age of 15 soon." Jinho looked bewildered, not understanding what his father meant, but King Taejong just smiled kindly and replied, "Go to sleep." The next morning, Jinho stood before the retainers and reported to King Taejong, "The 6 ministries need to be completely separated, and each ministry must meticulously record its work. If records are only kept in chronological order, future generations will have to spend a lot of time just to find the records they need." King Taejong asked the retainers if anyone had a different opinion. They reported, "We agree with the Crown Prince, Your Royal Highness." After all, King Taejong said, "I also think that is a good idea. The ministers and I know exactly why a certain policy was enacted, but future generations will only be able to read the records to understand the reasons. From now on, the minister of each ministry must write and classify records according to the Crown Prince's instructions." Everyone obeyed King Taejong's words, "As Your Royal Highness commands." After a strategic meeting with King Taejong, everyone was now dismissed. The chief censor and the chief inspector walked together, but they seemed a bit displeased. The chief inspector frowned and said, "Damn it, now the Crown Prince is even interfering with the 6 ministries' records. We are the ones who have to do the work here." The chief censor heard this and replied, "That's right. Haven't all things already been recorded in the official historian's records and the Royal Secretariat's diaries? The Royal Secretariat's diary is a record of the king's daily life and daily interactions with the bureaucracy." The chief inspector also agreed. "That's true, but isn't that doing useless work twice?" The chief censor continued, "Even without these changes, we've been too busy lately just because of the Crown Prince. At this rate, the Crown Prince will eventually create a big problem, won't he? To be honest, at this rate, the atmosphere in the court seems like it will change drastically. I keep thinking that if this continues, there will come a time when the Crown Prince will ruin everything he has built." The chief inspector refuted, "It won't go that far. After all, the Crown Prince still has his ethics." On the other hand, Jinho was now very excited. "This is a reform. A reform. I will completely change these disgusting customs. Just imagining it makes me very excited. You damned bureaucracy. I will not endure you anymore. The previous life was enough." Returning to the 2 retainers, the chief censor, hearing the chief inspector's words, added, "But all the proposals the Crown Prince has made go against common practice. If the Crown Prince accidentally proposes a policy that revives the ghost of the past..." Suddenly a voice interrupted, "That will never happen." The 2 retainers who had been arrogant moments ago suddenly bowed their heads respectfully. "Chief State Counselor, Your Excellency, you have arrived." Ryu Jung-hyun's face was full of sternness. He said, "There are many people who, after reading a few books, dare to discuss state affairs, but most of those fools know nothing about this world. If the Crown Prince oversteps his bounds and destroys what we have built, even if it is the Crown Prince, I will not sit idly by." The scene changed. King Taejong opened the morning session. "Returning from the Ming Dynasty must have been difficult, wasn't it? Thank you for your Royal Highness's understanding for this humble servant." The chief censor respectfully replied. The man then asked, "How is the Joseon legation?" The other reported, "After discussion, the Ming Dynasty decided to build the Joseon legation in Shandong province." Hearing these words, King Taejong felt somewhat relieved. "I understand. Was there anything noteworthy that happened during the trip?" The other party said, Yes, many Ming Dynasty merchants want to buy our Joseon paper." "Paper?" the king repeated, as if to confirm again. The chief censor continued, "Yes, Your Majesty. Many people want to buy it because our paper is better than the Ming Dynasty's paper. They requested us to bring more next time." After some thought, King Taejong briefly considered ordering the paper mill to increase production. "All right, you may return to your seat." Below, Jin-ho, after hearing this, looked pleased. "Good opportunity." So he spoke up. "Your humble son wishes to report to your Royal Highness." With just one sentence, he made the officials break out in a sweat. "Again, what is it this time?" King Taejong hesitated, asking, "Do you absolutely have to speak?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Seeing the child's determination, he gave him a chance to explain. "Then speak." Jin-ho calmly said, "Your humble son hopes Father King will order the paper mill to be abolished." Upon hearing this, everyone present was astonished. They all thought this was utterly unreasonable. How can the paper mill be abolished when so many people from the Ming Dynasty want to buy our paper? Isn't that going against the Crown Prince's previous views? This is an opportunity for us to earn new income. Why do this Jin-ho, hearing this, inwardly cursed, "Shut up one person at a time." Then he refuted everyone's opinion. "Abolishing the paper mill is consistent with my long-standing views." "Then explain yourself," King Taejong gently asked. Jin-ho politely replied, "Yes, Your Majesty. Father King also knows that Joshin's paper is of very high quality. This is thanks to our skilled paper makers. However, as your humble son understands, they are not paid fairly for the work they do. It is said that their wages are not even enough to support their families. So many have to find additional work or even quit to become tenant farmers or work in other workshops." Upon hearing this, Ryu Jung-hyun's expression gradually became serious. Jin-ho continued, "In such a situation, if the workload increases and the workshop management becomes stricter, even more people will quit." Ryu Jung-hyun quickly cut him off. "This problem is due to those people being too lazy. Those who work in the military workshops and other royal workshops are granted 9th rank official positions and receive corresponding salaries. However, among officials of that same rank, very few resign. This means that a lack of money is not an excuse for their laziness." Hearing these words, Jin-ho also frowned in anger. "Doesn't Your Excellency know that the officials you mentioned enjoy many other unofficial benefits? Even the chief state counselor's house always has visitors from dawn until dusk." Ryu Jung-hyun maintained his stance. "Those are gifts expressing gratitude. It is their sincere devotion." Jin-ho immediately argued back. "Did I say that was wrong? If we continue to ignore the efforts of the papermakers, how can they put all their effort into their work? If this continues, not only will technological development not be achieved, but our papermaking technology will disappear forever along with those craftsmen." Finally, King Taejong also showed agreement. "The Crown Prince is right." Ryu Jung-hyun, with a serious gaze, asked, probing, "Does the Crown Prince know that King Taejong himself established the paper mill? That was because the paper collected for banknotes was of inconsistent quality, making it extremely difficult to sort. If we abolish the paper mill, we will face that difficulty once again. Please reconsider, Crown Prince." Faced with these two lines of reasoning, King Taejong became even more conflicted. What should we do now? At that moment, Jin-ho turned to look at him, signaling, "You know what to do, right? Your humble son trusts Father King." Suddenly, his eyes shifted from determined to empty before his father's expression. "This old man again." King Taejong continued to ask, "Jin-ho, what do you think?" This made the protagonist momentarily think about how King Taejong had at some point developed a strange habit. Whenever an issue was raised in court, he would push it to Jin-ho to answer. No one knew why. Perhaps he wanted Jin-ho to participate in the discussions. After that, Jin-ho sighed and said in a sharp tone, "Have the esteemed ministers forgotten about the golden-tipped pens?" After clearly listing the standards required by the court, 3-chok, wide, 2-chok high, paper, not too rough, color as bright as peach blossoms. "We will hire people who meet these standards and offer the lowest price." Hearing this, Ryu Jung-hyun hesitated and asked, "But the cost?" Jin-ho continued to persuade them, "I'll give you an example, the golden-tipped pens. Recognizing them as royal merchants will help them do better business. The court can tax them and earn many times more profit than the cost incurred. Not only that, if Joseon merchants have to compete on paper quality, the quality will also increase and more Ming Dynasty merchants will seek to buy our paper." After hearing this, the officials could only be speechless. Suddenly, a voice rang out. In this humble minister's opinion, the Crown Prince's proposal seems very reasonable. That person was none other than the Minister of the Board of Revenue. At this moment, he began to explain himself. Our Joseon dynasty has been established for almost 30 years, and this problem still has no thorough solution. If costs continue to rise and we have a solution, why not use it? Hearing these words, Ryu Jung-hyun suddenly barked, Minister of the Board of Revenue, speak carefully. Don't you know that only if everyone abides by the teachings of the sages will the country be peaceful? Then the old man turned to report to King Taejong, Your Majesty, it seems the Crown Prince's opinion is correct, but it is only a temporary solution. For the country to be peaceful and prosperous, we must prioritize educating the people. Another official suddenly interjected, Your Majesty, what the Chief Inspector just said is merely theory. How can the people understand the teachings of the sages if they are constantly starving? Education is very important, but we can only educate the people when they have enough to eat. From these words, a heated argument broke out among everyone present. Hey, you're a high-ranking official, how can you say such a thing? Witnessing this scene, Jin-ho on the side could only give a faint smile. How interesting, I should invent Bapjang rice storage distribution system. Now, I just have to see how Father King reacts. This old man also likes to watch arguments. Seeing King Taejong wave his hand as if to indicate something the protagonist secretly guessed, Don't tell me he's about to give me another order. The king loudly intervened. Stop, I have listened to your opinions. Educating the people is indeed very important, but protecting the livelihood of the people is also an essential issue that needs to be addressed. I hope all of you come up with many solutions for this problem. Few dared to argue with the king's words, so the officials could only bow their heads and obey. We obey your command. King Taejong continued, As for the paper mill issue, I believe the Crown Prince's proposal is correct, but abolishing it immediately does not seem appropriate. Therefore, think of a more thorough solution to this problem and report back to me. This humble servant obeys your command. Everyone responded in unison after instructing them. King Taejong then turned to his beloved son and said, Crown Prince, listen carefully. Yes, Father King, Jin-ho replied respectfully, performing a bow. King Taejong said, I know you are very concerned with the prosperity of the nation and the welfare of its people. As the Crown Prince, you naturally must be concerned about this matter, so I will not reprimand you, but rather reward you. Jin-ho outwardly expressed gratitude, but in his heart he thought, I just got scolded. King Taejong continued to express a lingering doubt that had always puzzled him. However, every time you open your mouth, a whole host of people oppose you, and that is a problem. It's because neither I nor the ministers know what your opinions are based on. Therefore, I believe you need to explain your thinking when you present those ideas. Thus, I order you to present your political views. Hearing the four words, political views, Ryu Jung-hyun's face suddenly darkened. King Taejong continued, The location will be the main hall. All officials from the third rank and above, including all the ministers, will attend. Can you do it? Seeing the opportunity drawing closer, Jin-ho's joy was evident. So Father King wants me to give a presentation, right? Immediately after he resolutely said, Yes, Father King. Just give your humble son 5 days. After the session concluded, exiting the main hall, the ministers began to express their opinions. What political views could a child have? I can't understand what His Royal Highness is thinking. No matter how outstanding the Crown Prince is, he is still a child. Even with thorough preparation, it will be very difficult to persuade the ministers. I think so too, even if the Crown Prince prepares meticulously for 5 days. At this very moment, Ryu Jung-hyun suddenly spoke up. No, we must also prepare ourselves. Everyone turned to look and found it was the chief state counselor outlining his strategy. Not only the Confucian classics, but we also need to study the policies of other countries. Hearing this, the man felt it was somewhat unnecessary. But he's only 9 years old. Does he need such thorough preparation? Ryu Jung-hyun emphasized again for everyone to remember, have you forgotten what that 9-year-old child made us go through? The Crown Prince is not the only opponent we face. The Crown Prince is the one who speaks those words, but we can clearly see that it is also what His Royal Highness thinks. Has His Royal Highness ever opposed the Crown Prince's ideas until now? Putting the pieces together, the other party had to concede, indeed, that has never happened. Ryu Jong-hyun argued, "It's true the Crown Prince is only 9 years old, but we must remember that the one behind the Crown Prince is His Royal Highness. Therefore, everyone must prepare thoroughly. Don't forget how we built Joseon. We absolutely cannot let the bad habits of previous monarchs return." At the censorate, a voice rang out, "What do you think, Your Excellency?" The chief censor loudly said, "Anyway, we must submit an admonitory memorial first, shouldn't we? How can a 9-year-old child discuss politics?" Among the many people trying to undermine Jin-ho, only this man acknowledged him. However, from the golden-tipped pen incident, we have already seen the Crown Prince's true capabilities. Before he could finish, the chief censor quickly cut him off. "That's what vexes me the most. I should have objected immediately when the Crown Prince proposed trading the golden-tipped pens. After that incident, His Royal Highness and all the ministers only cared about money. Now I only regret it. We must write a memorial of protest immediately." "That's right," several ministers echoed. Without further hesitation, the chief censor immediately acted. Everyone out. In another development, a man reported to King Taejong, in short, most people's reactions were not very good, making Jin-ho annoyed to the point of pulling his hair. Why are they all such stubborn conservatives? The person next to him continued, "Most disappointing are the young officials of the Office of the Inspector General and the Censorate. I had anticipated that the Chief State Councilor would object because he has experience and knowledge, but even the young officials of the Censorate blindly adhere to the teachings of Neo-Confucianism. However, they all admit that the Crown Prince is very intelligent and firm, so many also acknowledge him." Upon hearing this, King Taejong's face gradually became gloomy and he said sternly, "I have no trustworthy talents, none at all." Meanwhile, in the Crown Prince's palace, Jin-ho was pondering the recent events and he concluded that there was a lack of talent, a great lack of talent. Anyway, those old fossils are truly too rigid. Hearing this, a young eunuch suddenly wondered, "Crown Prince, what is a fossil?" Jin-ho quickly dismissed his previous words, I wasn't talking to you, never mind." At that moment, many thoughts were stirring in his mind. Currently, it's not even the late period, but the early period of the Joseon dynasty. Teacher, didn't you say that during this period the ruling class was very flexible? How can I persuade those stubborn, obstinate people? Moreover, Father King also said he would summon all high-ranking officials and officials of the third rank. If I have to present my views before people who will surely despise me just because I'm young. Thinking it over and over, Jin-ho finally made up his mind. All right, I'll let them taste both 21st century capitalism and management methods. Immediately he set to work. Eunuch, I need to prepare something, so I need to visit the Royal Painting Bureau and the Armory. Yes, Your Royal Highness, the young eunuch respectfully replied, secretly thinking, what kind of trick will the Crown Prince come up with this time? 5 days later, at Gyeongbokgung Palace in the main hall, officials and ministers were all present. This man, seeing an acquaintance, excitedly went to greet him. Sir? Park, long time no see. The other person's face lit up with joy. Is that Sir P? How long has it been? When did you return to the capital? Park Seo-up said, I just arrived yesterday. The man then asked, probing, did His Royal Highness say the purpose of today's audience is to hear the Crown Prince present his political views? Seo-up sighed, looking weary. Yes, indeed. Why waste time coming here? Ryu Jong-hyun also chimed in, agreeing, that's right. Perhaps the ministers here think the same. At this very moment, a welcoming voice rang out. His Royal Highness the King has arrived. King Taejong stepped into the main hall. He sat on the throne and immediately went straight to the point. As the ministers know, the Crown Prince has recently put forward many ideas. However, I believe we cannot fully judge those ideas if we don't know their basis. Therefore, I have called you here to hear the Crown Prince present his political views. I hope you will listen carefully and guide the Crown Prince so that he does not go astray. We obey your command, everyone responded in unison. From a distance, footsteps grew closer. Jin-ho confidently strode forward with servants carrying supporting items following him. This attracted everyone's attention. "What is that?" Standing before King Taejong. The young boy bowed respectfully. "Your humble son thanks Father King for this opportunity. Now, your humble son will begin to present his political views." "Proceed," King Taejong said. Hearing this, Jin-ho clapped his hands. A memorial on the reform of Joseon was immediately unrolled. He took the megaphone and loudly proclaimed, "1, 2, 1, 2. Can you all hear me clearly?" Witnessing this, everyone was astonished. "What is that? The Crown Prince's voice is so loud. What is that thing?" The young boy continued, "Thanks to Father King granting this opportunity, I now meet all the esteemed ministers. Therefore, without further delay, I will begin." Everyone fell silent to listen to Jin-ho's presentation of his political views. The young boy presented many illustrations through drawings, confidently expressing his stance to achieve the best results for humanity. "I will go straight to the point. The most basic element of my political view is to achieve the best results for all mankind. I am sure you all know that this was also the view of King Taejo when he founded the Joseon dynasty. This also aligns with the basic views of the sages, specifically the way of the king, and making the people the foundation. To achieve this, first and foremost, the people's livelihoods must be secured and they must live in peace. However, our country has very little flat land and the mountains are steep, so the common people have to gather in the flat areas. There is too little land for agriculture, so won't the people suffer more and more? Therefore, we must actively encourage not only agriculture, but also handicraft and commerce for the country to develop and to buy what we lack from abroad." Hearing these words, some were gaping in surprise, some burst out laughing, and others remained silent, waiting for the next development. Jin-ho drew a diagram and based on it continued, "Therefore, we will have to adjust the current six-ministry system and local government to protect our good traditions. All the systems and institutions that I have used for a long time need to be changed. So first in the future, we will have to abolish the form of the six ministries. Instead, we will divide it into three larger branches, legislative, executive, and judicial, as well as establish positions within those three branches. Second, reform local government. Instead of concentrating all work on one person, officials will be assigned to share the work with each other. Third, establish an education system to help people escape poverty. I need to organize basic education to ensure that everyone knows the most basic knowledge. In addition, we must also exploit gold and silver mines, ensure that the tax process is fair, and reform the land system." Hearing this, everyone felt enlightened. Even more shocking than I thought. Just as I thought the Crown Prince is a crazy genius. Seeing the interesting expressions of the ministers, Jin-ho couldn't help but be amused. It's a bit too early to be surprised now. There's still a long way to go before I can relive my old pleasures. Inside the majestic main hall, the young boy clearly presented, "And that is my political view." After that speech, the old men around him were all astonished by a 9-year-old child. King Taejong also had to admit the boy was very talented. "Truly amazing. Did you come up with all of that yourself?" Jin-ho frankly admitted, "No. Your Majesty, your humble son consulted the Confucian classics of the sages and also read Western books." The man awkwardly said, "You truly mentioned many things that I hadn't even thought of. Although since our Joseon dynasty was established, many structures and ways of doing things have been changed, many other systems remain as they were." The young boy humbly said, "Father King praises too much. Your Majesty, Westerners have a saying like this, 'New wine must be put into new wineskins.' 30 years have passed since King Taejo founded the Joseon dynasty, but the people still suffer as before. Therefore, your humble son believes that we need to reform for the future of everyone." "For the future of everyone," King Taejong repeated the last words. Observing the gloomy expressions of the ministers and officials, Jin-ho loudly said, "That's right." Finally, the man officially declared, "Thus we conclude the presentation of the Crown Prince's political views here." Exiting the main hall, everyone was as silent as a sheet of paper. At this moment, someone suddenly spoke up, breaking the atmosphere. Chief State Counselor, what do you think? Ryu Jung-hyun, as expected, was still unconvinced. What do you mean? My mind is completely rigid now. We must submit an admonitory memorial immediately. The Crown Prince uses glamorous words like "for the future of everyone" to conceal himself while ignoring our values and traditions. Not only that, the Crown Prince even follows the legalists instead of the Confucians. I cannot help but feel heartbroken. Hearing this, the people around him also chimed in with his reasoning. I think so too. How could the Crown Prince come up with such a reckless idea? Even officials in the censorate had similar reactions. We must submit an admonitory memorial immediately. That's right, that's right. Firstly, Ryu Jung-hyun strongly objected to Jin-ho's ideas. On the surface, the Crown Prince's words seem reasonable, but in reality, His Royal Highness intends to re-establish the autocracy of Qin Shi Huang. We must stop him. The others couldn't help but discuss, but His Royal Highness seems to like the Crown Prince. Even so, we cannot let this dynasty collapse, can we? Ryu Jung-hyun suddenly had a ruthless thought. He growled, furthermore, if the worst-case scenario occurs, we will have no other choice but to depose the Crown Prince. The man heard this and was stunned. Isn't that too serious? Ryu Jung-hyun maintained his stance. After hearing the Crown Prince present his views, you still think that's too serious. Even His Royal Highness from the beginning was not. And before he could finish, someone quickly covered his mouth and whispered, Hey, watch your words. Do you think your neck is made of iron? Ryu Jung-hyun angrily pushed the other's hand away, sticking out his neck to argue, Did I say something wrong? A child of only 9 years old is still saying such nonsense? We must accuse those who taught the Crown Prince and His Royal Highness too. From ancient times, discipline has always been the most important. If they only praise him, the consequences will be very serious. The man quickly added, Then you should just say that the Crown Prince's discipline needs to be tightened, not depose him. Ryu Jung-hyun loudly shouted, Look at the current situation. Don't you think it's too late? We must depose the Crown Prince immediately. Only then will it be in accordance with the way of the king. Everyone heard this and felt a little uncomfortable. Your voice is too loud, Your Excellency. Conversely, quite a few ministers agreed with the Crown Prince's views. They happily chatted with each other. It's been a long time since I felt this comfortable, I agree with you. Usually I have to listen to meaningless words, but now hearing practical proposals about what Joseon needs right now, my ears feel clear. Did you see His Royal Highness's expression? His Royal Highness looks like he wants to implement those policies immediately. I never thought the Crown Prince would be so outstanding. Thus, our Joseon will... Before they could finish, they suddenly clashed with another group of people ahead. At this point, everyone was divided into two factions, one supporting the Crown Prince, the other not. As they passed each other, this group called the Crown Prince's supporters hypocrites and talkative. The other group called them authoritarian hypocrites. These words enraged the opposing side. Let's go arguing with them is just a waste of time. Let's go write a memorial. That's the only solution. On this side, everyone also told each other, do they think we don't know how to write memorials? We'll write too. By late afternoon, Jin-ho had a meeting with King Taejong and was praised extensively by him. Your presentation today was very good. Thank you, Father King. The young boy happily replied. King Taejong continued to admire him. I've said this once before, but your views mentioned many things I hadn't thought of. There are many policies I want to implement immediately. Jin-ho expressed his opinion, Father King praises too much, but to be honest, those policies are very difficult to implement immediately. King Taejong quickly replied, I know that. I always thought you and I should discuss policy more. Furthermore, I'm a little worried about the number of memorials we'll receive tomorrow. I'm sure the Royal Secretariat will be exhausted tomorrow. The young boy sighed. King Taejong then said, I will have food delivered to the Royal Secretariat. The next morning, in front of the Royal Secretariat, two men saw the scene before them and froze for a long time. They're really diligent. Yes, they are. Did they stay up all night? They're really strong. I don't even dare to go in anymore. The man quickly cut in, just standing there chatting. Will it reduce the workload? Go quickly and sort, the other asked again. Immediately after, everyone began their work. You also know that some people criticize the Crown Prince and some support him, so we divide this into two categories. I understand. King Taejong's face showed his weariness. It was all because of the stack of memorials piled up right in front of him. So many. You all are diligent. All right, I'll read first. With that, he picked up a random memorial and read it intently. Finally, he couldn't help but be surprised his hand clenched in anger. Immediately after, he turned and called out for Chief Palace Steward. Yes, Your Royal Highness, the man meekly replied. King Taejong sternly said, Summon the Crown Prince here. Jin Ho bowed to the emperor. Father King, did you summon your humble son? He replied, Yes, rise. Having said that, he picked up a scroll and said, Crown Prince, I summoned you because it seems quite a few officials didn't understand what you said yesterday. Suddenly, he loudly called out, Ryu Jong-hyun. The old man, hearing his name, immediately called out, Yes, Your Royal Highness. The emperor's expression was not at all pleasant. He held up the memorial and ordered, This is your memorial. Read it to the Crown Prince. The atmosphere became gloomy. The officials could only secretly glance at each other. Ryu Jong-hyun became even more cautious. Your Royal Highness. However, the emperor put it in front of the old man. The one being questioned must also hear it directly so that there are no misunderstandings between the two sides, right? At this point, the old man could only comply. As Your Majesty commands. After receiving it, the old man began to read aloud. This humble servant, Chief State Counselor Ryu Jong-hyun, humbly holds the brush and bows before Your Royal Highness. Reporting to Your Royal Highness, the emperor impatiently interrupted. Skip the preliminaries and go straight to the main part. The old man's face turned pale with fear. He finally managed to read, The Crown Prince's political views on the surface seem correct, but they include many unreasonable points. Jin Ho listened intently, his eyebrows furrowed. The old man continued to read. Firstly, our kingdom follows the principles of Neo-Confucianism, but what the Crown Prince said is more in line with the legalist school of thought. The legalist principles are excessively strict, causing the people to suffer and harming the nation. Secondly, the Crown Prince proposed abolishing restrictions on concubines' children, which are discriminatory rules against the children of concubines and their descendants. These restrictions were all enacted by King Taejong. If we carelessly abolish them, it would be an extremely unfilial act. Furthermore, if the children of concubines are allowed to enter the court as officials, then, as previous dynasties have shown, they will abuse their power. Thirdly, the Crown Prince said that the number of officials should be increased. The more officials there are, the greater the burden on the people will be. In this humble servant's opinion, if local officials feel they have too much work, they only need to ask local scholars for assistance. And after finishing, the old man finally raised his head and said, The 3 points above are the unreasonable points in the Crown Prince's political views. Jin Ho, hearing this, frowned and glared at the old man. Immediately after, he spoke up, asking the emperor, May your humble son reply. Seeing himself being glared at the old man, Ryu Jong-hyun clenched his fists, suppressing his anger. Hearing Jin Ho's question, the emperor replied, I permit you to reply. The Crown Prince stood alone between the 2 rows of people and clearly explained each point. First, Chief State Counselor said that Neo-Confucianism is the ideology used to govern our kingdom. However, the ideology of our country, according to the teachings of the sages, is the way of the king and making the people the foundation. Neo-Confucian philosophy is merely a tool for us to implement that ideology. The officials were astonished by this statement. One of them, frightened, wanted to speak up and remind the Crown Prince. However, he continued to speak clearly, Neo-Confucianism is just a small branch of Confucianism. If we only focus on that, isn't it too limiting? I'll use an analogy. If the way of the king is a plate, then ideologies and rule systems are bowls. Is it truly necessary to distinguish between those tools when applying the way of the king? His words were so convincing that the chief state counselor, despite his anger, could only clench his teeth. Then Jin Ho aggressively continued, Second, you said that concubines' children will abuse their power, but in previous dynasties, were they the only ones who abused their power? Ryu Jong-hyun couldn't listen anymore and loudly called out, Your Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, But Jinho paid no attention and continued, "Isn't it true that everyone from large families, whether legitimate or illegitimate, engages in corrupt behavior? Isn't it too unfair to blame all the faults on concubines' children? Furthermore, doesn't the law clearly state that all those who marry concubines must be prosecuted? However, most of the ministers here all have concubines, don't they? Or have powerful families developed a habit of bearing their mistakes and thus discriminating against concubines' children?" Who would have thought he could speak so directly? The officials could only stiffen their mouths, bow their heads, and pretend not to hear. "And third," he said, clenching his hand into a fist, "you said that local officials can ask local scholars for assistance if they have too much work. Right, ever since I began sitting next to Father King and observing him handle state affairs, I've heard countless reports from countless places that unfortunate people are starving to death. However, I've never heard anything about local scholars stepping up to assist the starving people or opening granaries to relieve their hunger," suddenly he emphasized. "And not only that, instead of helping the people solve their problems, they take advantage of droughts to lend money at interest rates many times higher than the standard rate. In the end, the people have no choice but to sell themselves into servitude or become refugees while their land is expropriated." Finally, he directly asked Ryu Jung-hyun, Chief State Counselor, "Tell me, for common people with no power or influence, who is more terrifying than tigers and leopards, the officials in court or those local scholars?" The old man, startled by being called out, winced and lowered his head. The emperor glared at the old man and, not hearing anything, said directly, "I also want to hear your answer." Ryu Jung-hyun replied, his entire body breaking out in a sweat. He gritted his teeth, not uttering a single word. Jinho didn't let him off the hook and asked further, "Why are you silent, Chief State Counselor?" The old man's hands were full of bulging veins. Under duress, he reluctantly said, "It's the local scholars, Your Royal Highness." The other officials, hearing this, couldn't help but feel tense. The emperor then appropriately said, "The memorials from others are also similar to the Chief State Counselors. Different people submitted the memorials, but the content of each memorial is similar. How funny." Then he picked up a yellow scroll. "However, this one is different. Crown Prince, you read it." Jinho bowed to receive it. "Yes, Your Majesty." First he unrolled it and quickly scanned it. Suddenly his eyes widened and his eyebrows furrowed.